across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Monday morning, this is Duncan Barkes in for Julia Hartley-Brewer. It is Talk, the home of common sense. Hope you had a good weekend and thank you for choosing us. This is the place where the United Kingdom comes to talk, and there's a hell of a lot of stuff to talk about this morning. First off, you need to know how to get involved. 0344 499 1000. You can call that number, we'll chat, you can WhatsApp your message to that number, or you can send a voice note and we'll play them out. And if you're a little bit old school, as I like to say, we have a text number, 87222. Start your message with the word talk. I want to get into the whole area this morning about security surrounding our politicians and our MPs. Of course, we'll keep you fully updated regarding the investigation into the murder of Anne Widdecombe. The police very keen that nobody speculates. We're not in the market for speculation here at Talk, but we are in the market of informing people when something happens. So I certainly suspect inside the next couple of hours we might get an update from Devon and Cornwall police, who I have to say haven't been brilliant with their communications with the general public so far. Not having a go at the police, if you're a serving officer and you're listening, not having a go at the people on the ground. I'm just saying people want answers. And even if you don't have a great deal to say and update people on, sometimes it's still better to roll out your top copper and just explain the current situation and what may or may not happen next. But we'll put that to one side for now. Tell me, when we talk about politicians in this country, and I mean right across the political spectrum, OK? So in that I include, obviously, the Tories, Labour, Lib Dem, Reform and the Greens. Have I missed anyone out? I don't think I have. How much security do you think they should have? What kind of protection do you think they should have? Now, I've got a little bit of skin in the game here. In a past life, I'm just thinking, 5 years ago, I spent a year running an MP's office. I was what's known as a senior parliamentary assistant, and I ran the constituency office and also the Westminster office. And I did it for a year, and I saw a lot of stuff. Westminster is a fascinating place for all kinds of reasons, but also I remember very distinctly one Friday afternoon. So just to give you a bit of background here, on a Friday, most MPs are back in their constituencies, and it's called the Constituency Day. And what they do is they go and visit local businesses, they hold surgeries, and they talk to people, they talk to their constituents. Well, decent MPs do. And I remember very, very clearly, one Friday afternoon, I was out with a particular MP, this person who I worked with, who's no longer an MP, by the way, lost his seat in 2024, and we were doing a visit to, I think it was one of the vaccination places off the back of COVID. You know, they built these great big Nightingale hotels, not hotels, hospitals, Nightingale hospitals, which most of which weren't needed, but this one was turned into a place where you could go and get your vax, right? And a local MP went along to thank the people. And we did the visit, and then literally just after the news broke, it appeared on our phones that the Conservative MP for Southend, David Amess, had been murdered. And I looked at the MP that I work with, and we both shuddered because MPs, up until then, didn't really have any kind of protection or security. Remarkably vulnerable. Now, sadly, it took the murder of David Amess and also Joe Cox, the Labour MP, before certain security measures were put in place. I'm not going to go into a massive amount of detail, but if you work for an MP, you can have a thing, a little kind of like a gizmo, a bit of technology that you can press, and you can talk to someone if you need to, and you can escalate if you think you're at risk. The MPs can have that as well. Certainly in the constituency office, we had panic buttons, and I'll tell you what, some weird people turned up at the constituency office. I mean, look, I'm a bit of a middle-aged lump, right? I can take care of myself if I need to, but, you know, sometimes you get some people banging on the front door who clearly weren't very stable. It's frightening. Now, since 2 MPs were murdered, security has increased. So just to give you a bit of background very quickly, if you have a surgery where constituents turn up to tell you their problems, you can have a police officer present. If you're doing a visit, you can have police security with you. And that's good, and that's right, and that is proper. However, I would make the observation that MPs and politicians are still remarkably vulnerable. Now, until we know what happened to Anne Widdecombe and why, we'll put that to one side for a second. but they are remarkably vulnerable. And we now live in a world, we live in a country where people think it's all right, certainly to verbally assault people because they disagree with them. And I think there's a contingent out there who believe physically it's all right to have a go at someone because they have a view that they don't like. Sad reality of life, I'm afraid. 21st century Britain. Great, isn't it? MPs are still vulnerable, and let me tell you why they're vulnerable, and so are other politicians, because whilst you might get some security if you're doing a visit or you've got a surgery or whatever, let's say it's a Saturday night and you phoned up your local Indian and you've ordered a takeaway and you think, well, I've had a glass of wine, I'll walk down the street and go and get the Indian for me and my family. You are vulnerable. You'll be walking along the street and anyone could appear with a Stanley knife. I mean, I don't want to be graphic about it, but that is the state of affairs today. So it gets us into this whole area, I think, justifiably this morning on Talk. How much security should MPs and politicians get? 0344 499 1000. And you, as a taxpayer, would you have a problem with paying for it? Because the money's got to come from somewhere. And we're not just saying, oh, well, it should be only these MPs because they're outspoken. It's got to be right across the board, right? 0344 499 1000 for your calls, your WhatsApp messages and your voice notes. 87222 on the text. Start your message with the word talk. There is a story knocking around this morning about Reform UK, who are warning Labour MPs that restricting party finances could put the lives of its politicians in danger. There's something going through Parliament at the moment. Labour backbenchers this week will seek to cap political donations at either £1 million or £100,000 when the government's flagship elections bill returns to the Commons later this week. And this is significant because if you cap donations, there's less money if you're a political party to protect your MPs and other campaigners. So answer me this question this morning. I think we need to have a serious debate regarding the security of MPs and politicians in this country. How much security should they get? Is it just when they're doing their normal business, or should it be extended? And who should pay for it? 0344 499 1000. Lines available. Call me, WhatsApp me, voice note me. Sounds a bit kinky. 87222 on the text. Start your message with the word talk. Let's get a view on this and loads of other views regarding some of the stories circulating this morning here on Talk with Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum. It's Philip Gazzelli. Hello, Philip.
Hi, Duncan. Great to see you.
Great to see you, and thank you for your time on this Monday morning. Let's start with the story that rightly is dominating the news agenda at the moment, the murder of Anne Widdecombe, the death of Anne Widdecombe. What's your current reaction to where we find ourselves? We still don't know if this person who was arrested on Saturday night is going to be charged. We've been told by Devon and Cornwall Police that speculation is not helpful, and you might have heard my intro there talking about security for politicians. But before we get into that, let's talk about your current take on where we find ourselves. What are you thinking?
Well, it's been an emotional roller coaster, especially for me, because I knew her a little bit. You know, I spent a little bit of time with her and I'd spoken to her quite a bit. So just finding out what happened on Friday morning was I thought she'd died of natural causes. And then it turns out she was horribly murdered. Then they had the wrong person. Now they've got another person who travelled, 270 odd miles to go down there, allegedly. It's all bizarre. It's like a surreal nightmare. But my take on this is that we are living in an increasingly dangerous, frightening and unhinged society. And I think there are two things happening here. First of all, we are living in a balkanized society, a sectarian society, where the lines are drawn and there is real hatred on both sides, I think, but there's real hatred, particularly coming from the leftist identitarians who are increasingly extreme, and of course the Islamists as well. They not only hate the right, they hate the West, they hate Britain. So it's a whole baggage of things, okay, which is very, very intimidating, not just for politicians, but those of us who are centre-right, philosophical conservatives, whatever. That's one thing, okay? I think the other thing is that the institutions, education, the NHS, the heritage media are all bought into this, okay? And if you think about education, what you have is people trained, encouraged to be activists and revolutionaries. It's not enough to be against racism. You have to actively act against racism. You have to be anti-racist. Now, that doesn't mean that you just don't like racism. That means you have to buy into a very active and very aggressive ideology that, as I said before, takes apart the heritage of the West, holds the West and Britain to account for things, frankly, that they haven't done. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on here. It's very, very complex. It's very, very worrying. Now, to deal with it in various ways, first of all, yes, I absolutely agree with you that we have to take the threats to public figures very, very seriously and increase security. But we also have to be a bit more honest around the conversation around it. So the police are saying, and I'm not speculating here, I agree with that, but the police are saying, oh, we have no idea what the motive is, but we're pretty sure it's not political. We're keeping an open mind, but we don't want you to think it's political. Okay, there's a contradiction there, and we know how these things work because we've seen it time and time again. So I think. Pardon me. I think we need to be, as a society, we need to be honest about this. I think the establishment and the authorities need to listen to what we are saying, and they need to take on board our questions rather than just shut us down. Now, that doesn't mean crazy Wild West kind of speculation and all sorts of conspiracy theories. It means understanding that we have legitimate questions to ask. They should answer them.
Let me just pick over something you said there, because I think it's really interesting, Philip. I mean, certainly over the last 48 hours, when we've read the tributes about Anne Widdecombe, there is a theme that appears, which is she was the kind of politician that of course she had strong views. However, she also believed in debating those views, and at the end of the day, you could go to the bar in the House of Commons afterwards and have a drink with maybe your opposite number or someone who disagreed with you. And we used to have if you like, a line of politicians that you could do the same with. I call them the big beasts of the past who are sadly missed. You know, great intellects, able to articulate their viewpoint, and were happy to say, OK, well, I disagree with you, so let's agree to disagree, let's move on. We don't live in that world now, at least to me it seems we don't. When do you think it changed, and what was the catalyst?
Oh God, that's a good question. Before I tell you when and why, I think you're absolutely right. And I remember when Alan Clark, you remember the Tory politician Alan Clark died, and Tony Benn, the polar opposite in every single way, gave this lovely tribute that started with him saying, you know, he was a very kindly man personally, and just gave this tribute. And that, for me, sums up precisely what you said. It sums up what we've lost as a society. Now, I spent 25 years in higher education in the university sector, and I saw this coming. I saw this coming about 15 years ago, but I think it changed for us fundamentally round about 2015, 2016. And you can trace it back to the activism, Duncan. Okay, so it starts with Me Too. Then it develops massively and goes into a different gear with BLM. Then there's lockdown, and there's all kinds of stuff around vaccines. Then there's the trans activism. Then there's the pro-Palestine stuff. And you can link it through all of those movements. They're different things, but fundamentally they are the same. They are pushing back and attacking what is kind of Britishness, Westernness. They are fundamentally anti-Western, Marxist, postmodernist movements that are against us in every kind of way.
But we've allowed these people to fester, haven't we? We surely, I say we, I'm not just talking about you and I, but as a society, we've tolerated this kind of stuff for too long. And now, dare I say it, it's come to bite us on the backside.
Well, it's quite easy to be complacent, isn't it? You know, because we pride ourselves in being a tolerant society. And I was thinking, you know, when you were just showing the images of Anne Widdecombe there, she was talking about free speech at the Oxford Union. She was debating there, and it was just fantastic. You know, she was an amazing advocate for free speech, and so am I. You know. But there comes a point where if you tolerate intolerance, then the intolerance will take over. And that clearly is what's happened in our institutions. You know, it's DEI, it's all of these inclusivity initiatives, which really aren't about inclusivity. They're about imposing an ideological agenda.
Yeah, and they're also about control as well. Listen, Philip, I'm going to ask you to pause for a second, because I want to come back in a few moments and talk about two things specifically, one of which is related to something you've just mentioned, this ex-Labour candidate and university employee who's currently been investigated after saying she hoped Anne Widdecombe suffered, and these are their words, an extremely painful death. And I wanted to get your view, and also the views of listeners and viewers of Talk, as to whether or not this person should lose their job or somehow be prosecuted. I also want to get your view as well, Philip, on this whole idea of capping donations to political parties. We'll do that in a few moments' time. Talking to Philip Cazelli, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum. It's a Monday morning. I'm Duncan Barkes in for Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
20 past 10, Monday morning. I'm Duncan Barkes. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Just to keep you fully updated this morning here on Talk, we are expecting some kind of announcement in the next couple of hours from Devon and Cornwall Police, because looking at the timeline regarding the alleged murder of Anne Widdecombe and the 28-year-old white British man in Rotherham who's been arrested, you might have seen the front page of the Sun newspaper this morning, video footage of that particular person getting into his red Corsa car. Now, this man was arrested on Saturday evening, and as we understand it, the police are able to detain this person for 36 hours. That would have finished at 9 o'clock this morning. So we'll keep you updated, and I would have thought that Devon and Cornwall Police at some point in the next couple of hours will either have to do a number of things. They'll either have to do another press conference, they will either have to apply to extend the time that they question this man for, or they're going to have to release this person. So we'll keep you fully updated here on Talk. Let's continue our chat this morning with Philip Cazelli, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum. And we're looking at this whole area about security for politicians and MPs, Philip. And you've explained brilliantly so far this morning as to why we find ourselves in this situation where we have politicians and MPs potentially needing security. I mean, I've got a great message here from Stephen in London, who says, if you want to know where all of this comes from, I'll quote for you, Tory scum. That is the attitude that has been excused and tolerated. And Stephen is bang on the money, right, isn't he? Because even Angela Rayner was caught, secretly filmed, branding Conservatives as Tory scum. So you can argue that if you let that go unchallenged, I don't ever recall her properly apologising for it. Is it no wonder that we have activists and people in this country who think it's all right to verbally assault or verbally abuse or do worse things to politicians? What do you make of this transgender ex-Labour candidate who celebrated the death of Anne Widdecombe and prayed she had, quote, screamed in agony? This is Heather Herbert, who apparently is a web developer at Aberdeen University, relished the good news, her words, its words, of Miss Widdecombe's death in a post on Blue Sky, which is quite a lefty bit of social media by my reckoning, Blue Sky. I had a look on there over the weekend. There's some vile stuff going on. She's been investigated, or Heather is being investigated, regarding the post that she made. The police and her employer are looking into the comments, posted before news of the murder investigation broke. It does appear that Heather Herbert is doubling down on this. Let's cut to the chase. Should she be prosecuted for what she said? Should she lose her job? What do you think?
Well, this is a really difficult one, but I think first of all we should get the terminology right. This is a biological male,
Yep.
so I'm going to call him him.
Yeah, me too.
And I was just thinking about the what Steve said before about Tory scum. He's absolutely right, but as you were saying that, I was thinking about another phrase, and it's puncher Nazi. That's another one, isn't it? Mm-hmm. What happens is if they demonize, if they're allowed to demonize, and they monster politicians and commentators, then they are freed up to do what they want because they are just attacking evil, right? That's what they're doing. That's their mindset, and that legitimizes then violence through words, and ultimately, as far as they're concerned, legitimizes, it doesn't really, of course, but as far as they're concerned, legitimizes violent actions because they are just acting as revolutionaries. They are playing out a romanticized version of themselves. Now, this man is playing out a romanticized version of himself in terms of gender as well. So there's quite a lot going on here to unpack. But it's interesting, as I said before, the institutions are completely captured. The long march through the institutions has been going on for decades. And this person is a very good example of that. He feels as though he can say this stuff on social media because he is in a cultural ecosystem. He is in an environment in which that kind of stuff, i.e. that university or universities like it, that kind of sentiment is just de rigueur. That's what people think. So that, in a way, Duncan, that shows us the scale of the problem we have here. This is higher education. This is the establishment. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's the official university line.
No, but I think a lot of people.
Sorry, just a point. But the rank and file from professors down. I'm talking about the whole sector here, from professors to student support. They generally feel the same thing. There is a particular kind of sentiment.
It's the culture, isn't it? It's the culture. Yeah, the culture allows it. I used the word earlier, to fester. It allows it to fester, and some might argue it actually almost promotes it, because if you don't have this politically correct view on certain things within certain areas of the public sector, including the educational sector, you won't get too far. It's difficult, this, isn't it? Because you and I suspect, are in the same place when it comes to freedom of speech. We believe that people should have their views and they shouldn't be challenged. Well, they should be challenged, but they certainly shouldn't be penalised for having their views. So when you look at this, do we look at it and just go, do you know what? As vile as these comments are, this is an example of freedom of speech, and this person should not lose their job and should not be prosecuted? Or do we say a line has been crossed?
Well, in this particular instance, I think we say a line has been crossed. As I say, I'm a champion of free speech, and I have been cancelled from a university. Okay, so this is very close to home. But the problem here, this isn't ideological. This isn't about ideas and concepts. This is about vicious, and you could say it's vicious incitement, because if someone glorifies and wants someone to have a particular kind of person to want to have a very painful and protracted death, you think that they would want other people to have that as well, people of the same stripe. So there is something very sinister going on here. And as I say, this isn't about ideas. I'm happy to take on all kinds of ideas, reprehensible people. I will debate them all. I do over the media all the time.
Yeah.
But what I won't tolerate is this kind of desire to have people suffer and be tortured and die. That is just wrong. And that, in a way, that's the crux of the whole thing. That isn't free speech. That is hatred. You know, they love all of this hate speech and all of that kind of thing. They are the purveyors of it. And that is hate speech, and we should just close it down.
All right, let's take a call on this. This is Simon in Glasgow. Hello, Simon. Welcome to Talk.
Hello, how you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Philip's here as well. What would you like to say?
Yeah, well, basically, I've just been watching Philip there, and I feel a bit surplus to requirements now because he's pretty much said exactly what I was thinking. It is, I think we've got to look beyond the security here, and we've got to look at sort of like, you know, go back and see how this is kind of sprung up. And I totally agree. I think there's a big left bias in our education and our higher education institutions, and I think for a long time now the left wing and some of these commentators have gotten away with it, and they've never felt the consequences of some of the stuff that they've said, and by extent potentially the violence that they've caused. And I mean, just to pick up one point, if you know, when they started calling Nigel a Nazi or anybody who disagreed with him a fascist, or agreed with him, sorry, a fascist, without really understanding the actual implications of what that word means. And I don't know who it was who said that. Maybe it was Joseph Goebbels even. He said, but, you know, if you tell a bigger lie long enough and repeat it for long enough, eventually it becomes true. And all it takes is just one person with a disturbed mindset to latch onto that, and it just gives them a justification to go and do this. And I think it's going to carry on until somebody actually, or something is actually done about this, but it doesn't seem to be doing that. Nothing seems to be happening at the moment.
So let's strip this down a little bit, Simon, and thank you for getting involved this morning, because your view and your call is worth its weight in gold. I mean, where do we go from here? So let's talk about Heather Herbert, this web developer at Aberdeen University, who posted this vile stuff about Anne Widdecombe. Should he lose his job over what he posted?
I think so. I mean, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because, again, you know, I'm an advocate for free speech, but I'm also an advocate for sort of like accepting the consequences of your own actions. And there is such a thing as free speech, and then there's just this...
Does this cross the line, Simon, in your view?
Yeah, absolutely. I do believe so, yeah. I mean, it's just vile. I mean, the thing is, if you want a decent barometer as to who's got the more hate inside them, the right or the left, just go on X and just see some of the comments just after poor Anne Widdecombe's death.
I know. And give me your view. Give me your view, if you would, about security for politicians and MPs in general, because I'm keen to kick this around this morning on Talk. I mean, how much security do you think MPs in this country should get? And I'm being very clear about this. It's right across the political spectrum, because I do think we have a problem with the security of politicians and MPs in this country. I mean, as a taxpayer, would you have an issue if MPs had 24/7 security funded by you?
No, I wouldn't, to be honest with you. I mean, it's a bit depressing that we come to a society where we have to have this debate, but I do believe so, because I think there's so much toxicity now that sort of like, you know, good faith discourse has just gone out the window now, and it's just battle lines drawn. And if you don't agree with me, then, you know, I've got a justification to do whatever I want to you, and I just don't think there's any place for it. So unfortunately, it's the world we live in. Until we can overcome that problem, I don't know, but I do believe that the politicians, I mean, all across the house, they deserve to be, you know, secure and safe and stuff like that. And I totally agree with it.
All right, Simon, great call. Thank you. 0344 499 1000. Do what Simon did. Give us a call. We'll stick you on. We'll have a chat this morning here at the home of common sense, which is Talk. Philip, I can't believe it. We've run out of time already, which is gutting, because there's so much more to talk about.
Yeah, there really is.
It is. Well, obviously, you know, you'll be back on Talk very soon. Let me just give you a final opportunity. I mean, in terms of what you said so far, is it possible to somehow, I'm trying to end this on a positive note, and I don't think necessarily we might be able to do it, but let's try. Is it possible to get political discourse in this country back to where it was 20, 30 years ago, where, you know, you'd sit round a table with someone and they might just go, right, let's just agree to disagree. It's my round. I'll go and get the beers in. Can we ever get back to that point, or has it gone past the point of no return?
Well, I think we live in a fundamentally different country now, and we've been assailed by identity politics. So the only way we can get back to talking about ideas, first of all, is to banish the threat of violence. Okay, you can't have free speech when your speech is regulated by the fact that you might get killed or beaten up or whatever. That just doesn't work. Okay, so we need to get rid of that. We also need to take on the sectarian nature of identity politics. And if we can do that, it's a really broad generational project, as I say, because it's so deep and complex, rooted primarily in education. I think we need to start in education. And if we can do that, hopefully we will get to a place where we can say what we want, we can deal in ideas, and we can be grown up about disagreeing.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you, Philip. That's Philip Gazzelli, Senior Fellow at the New Cultural Forum here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. You want to pick up on anything Philip said, call that number, WhatsApp me your thoughts, or voice notice to that number, 0344 499 1000. Up next, we're going to talk to former Met Police Detective, Chief Inspector Mike Neville, just to try and get a sense of where we might be heading with this investigation into what appears to be the murder of Anne Widdecombe. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm Duncan Barkes. This is Talk, the home of common sense. You want to get involved this morning, 0344 499 1000. I want you to tell me, when we talk about the MPs and politicians here in the United Kingdom, how much security do you think they should have? And are you happy as a taxpayer to pay for it? I think we live in massively disturbing times. I think it's been proven our country has changed inside the last 15 to 20 years, where we have, let's be honest, some quite vile people we have to share society with, who believe that their views are the right views and consequently are quite happy to use extreme forms of behaviour to enforce their point. That includes verbally abusing people and also physically abusing people. And sadly, there's a cohort of people in this country who think that politicians are fair game. Now, I've worked in politics, right? I've got political views. You have political views. But I would never, ever take the view that we should be violent to someone we disagree with. Maybe I just need to get with the times. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a view on where we find ourselves this morning with the investigation into the death of former Conservative MP, Reform UK spokesperson Anne Widdecombe. Let me tell you what we know so far. Police say there's no suggestion of a political motive in the killing after this new arrest. The arrest was made on Saturday. And as we understand it, the person can be detained for up until 36 hours, which means That finished at 9 o'clock this morning, so we're waiting to find out what happens next. We also know that the Anne Widdecombe suspect was caught on CCTV. If you're watching us at the moment, you can see the pictures there, leaving his home with what appears to be a wooden stick, getting into a red Corsa car. This was hours before the ex-MP was killed 270 miles away. We know this. We also know that Anne Widdecombe's home was shown on national TV just 5 days ago before she was killed inside her isolated bungalow. And the police continue to say the Widdecombe murder, any speculation surrounding it, is unhelpful and distressing. What we need to do is get inside the mindset of how the police are operating, what they've been doing and what they might do going forward. And to help us do that is Mike Neville, former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector. Hello, Mike.
Yes, good morning.
Morning. Thank you for your time. So let's cut to the chase here. I think the question that everyone wants the answer to, if we've done our sums correctly, this man was arrested in Rotherham on Saturday evening, 28-year-old white British man. He can be detained for up to 36 hours. That would have finished at around 9 o'clock this morning, we understand.
Let me clarify that, sir. So I understand that he was arrested just before midnight, 23:41 hours on Saturday night. Now, you're not, for a normal offence, you can be kept in for 24 hours. So that would take us to last night, just before midnight. A superintendent can then sign off for another 12 hours, which would take us to about 11:40 this morning. Now, if the police want to, with a very serious crime as this is, murder and things like that, you can then go to the magistrates' court and apply for a warrant of further detention, which could be for as long as 96 hours. So the total would be 4 days, starting at 23:41 on Saturday. And so they have to, and what the police will do, of course, in this sort of case, you'll have a lot of forensic evidence, and forensic evidence you can't really analyse it fast time. You know, these things are scientific. And so the scientists they will want as much of the forensic evidence to put to the suspect before they charge him. Hence, that's why they'll want to keep him in court. And they'll also keep him in the cells at the police station for further interviewing. And of course, they'll be analysing all the CCTV, putting a timeline together.
Understood.
So that's what the police are working on.
OK, so just for clarity purposes and just so my viewers and listeners understand, and I understand as well, and thank you for updating us on the timeline, we would expect some kind of announcement in the next couple of hours regarding what's happening next, whether or not this man is released or detained further. Is that correct?
Yeah, I imagine that will be the case. I imagine the police will brief people. The police can't, you know, there's been criticism of the police here for saying, oh, why didn't they release the CCTV footage? Well, my expertise is using images to catch criminals, and you only release it to the public if you don't know who it is. Because firstly, you know, you're warning the suspect that you have an image, and they might then, you know, destroy evidence, clothing, things like that. And so I think the police here have done a good job in doing this. But there will be a break in the information coming out of the police, I think, because they're really focusing on this inquiry now and getting the man charged, I imagine.
Give me an honest answer, and I'm sure you will, Mike. How helpful is it for some of the newspapers this morning, including The Sun, to have the footage on the front page of this suspect going into his red Corsa car? Is that helpful? I mean, would Devon and Cornwall police be thinking that's really something we could do without? What would be the mindset behind that?
If I was the senior investigating officer, I would understand that the public wants information. It wouldn't impact on the case. You know, the man's in custody. You know, all newspapers are sensible enough not to put that stuff out if it would warn the suspect off. He's already been arrested. As the senior investigating officer, I would simply be getting on with it. And I would appreciate that this is a case which has attracted much interest, because Anne was a lovely lady, very famous, but it's also the brutal killing of an old lady in her own home. So the public are going to be interested. And when they say, oh, you shouldn't speculate, we live in a world of speculation, don't we, of social media. So I'm sure the police officers are just focusing on the job, and they've done a good job so far.
Give me your take on something that we've heard, which is, one of our earlier guests said is a little bit of a contradiction, which is the idea that the police are keeping an open mind, but they don't think it's politically motivated. I don't think I've misquoted anyone there.
Yeah,
that doesn't work, does it?
You know, I agree with you, and it's best to say nothing. It would be best to say we really don't know, because it's not until you speak to somebody that that they might give you some motive. The man may well sit there and say no comment to every question, so we may never know in the sense that why he's done this wicked deed, and we can only hope we find out. And so it gives us we could then check up on is anybody else at threat or anything like this? What's the man's aims here? But to say it's not political and then we don't know is like you say, contradictory. So why say it in the first place?
And you've been good enough to explain, given your experience, your vast wealth of experience, what the police will have been up to over the last 36 hours. Forensics obviously taking a major part in that, both at Anne Widdecombe's home and also the home of this man who's been detained. Just give us a sense of what else they will be looking for. Will they be contacting friends of this suspect? What else will be going on?
Well, there'll be all sorts of intelligence checks on the background of this man. One of the particular things, it's been highlighted that he was possibly carrying a weapon. Has that been recovered? That would be a key piece of evidence, of course. Then then trawling all the CCTV. They would like a timeline of how he travelled down from Rotherham. Was he captured on different cameras as he came down? What was he doing when he went to different petrol stations or something? Analysing his phone, his devices, because all that digital forensics, because that is the best way really to find a motive, to search his computer and phone and see what Google searches he's been doing before this. So all those things will be being done. If the weapon hasn't been recovered, there'll be an almighty search for that around the area of the house, and also the probable route, if they can trace where he's gone back, because he may have been caught on CCTV disposing of evidence. So that's the police have a lot to do here.
And finally, are you expecting an update from the police inside the next couple of hours, given the timeline that you've very helpfully outlined?
Yeah, I would think if they were going to keep him in custody for the going to the magistrates' court, the press will see them going to the magistrates' court to apply for it anyway, so we'll know. So, with the police, I always found speak to the media, because if you create a void, that void is very soon filled by badness if you're not careful. Yeah, there's a lack of information. If there's a vacuum, then it does get filled in all kinds of ways. And finally, Mike, whilst I've got you here, we're talking about the security of MPs and politicians this morning on Talk, and whether or not, once again, we have to look that we live in a very different world, some might say quite an extreme world these days, politically. Do you think there's an argument for greater security for politicians and MPs, and should it be taxpayer funded? I think there should be a greater security. We've got to have the best people going into Parliament to run the country, and people have got to be able to feel safe if they're doing that, and it shouldn't be down to individuals to pay. I think there should be a risk assessment. Some politicians are far more at threat than others, and therefore we could, everybody doesn't get the same, but we need to do something to protect our elected representatives. Mike, great talking to you this morning. Thank you. There's Mike Neville, former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector, here on Talk. Let's take a call on this whole area of MP security. This is Carl, who's in Surrey. Hello, Carl.
Hello. Hi. I hope you all are well.
Very well indeed. What would you like to say this morning?
Oh, I mean, to me, it's quite straightforward. Absolutely, fundamentally, we should protect democracy. Okay, that is what we're built on. It's the cornerstones of our society, and the way that we've kind of developed over a long time, centuries.
Well, they call Britain the mother of parliaments, don't they? So we've got a track record of being responsible for democracy and around the world, with the Great Britain being used as a blueprint. So when you say we need to protect democracy, does that mean that even if you have politicians who've got extreme views on the left side of politics or the right side of politics, that we need to ensure they are properly protected both in their professional life and in their home life in order for democracy to be protected?
Absolutely. It was always, it's the cornerstone of who we are. Yeah, it is what we are. So, we wouldn't be where we are without what we believe in. And it's what we kind of, other things might change, policies, politics, all goes away. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is that we can debate, that we can tussle between ourselves, really, and choose and path the best way that we go. And I think that funding for that forget some other things that we fund. Yeah, there's a lot of places we can pull money from. And that should also be down to, this debate as well. But at the end of the day, we have to stick up for each other. We have to listen to each other, and we have to be a, entity, really, in a way. So yes, you can't just protect MPs while they're doing their job, in the city. You have to make sure that I'm not going to get killed for my views once I go home. It's 100% positively that we have to protect this, and we have to pull funding. And the places that I would probably suggest pulling funding from is the same as anyone listening to this show. Yeah, there's a million things we spend money on that we shouldn't, and that should be repurposed.
Understood. Listen, thank you, Carl. That's Carl in Surrey. A few messages coming in here. This is Paul, who says, Duncan, nobody drives 540 miles there and back without a motive. I believe the police are taking us for fools. This is Pete. Pete H. MP security. No changes should be made to MP security until MPs have fixed the security situation for everyone else in the country. They should serve us first and themselves second. Once that has been done, I would support special measures for MPs in particular situations. Pete, I think you're wrong. I think you're absolutely way off the mark there. We need to be protecting our parliamentarians. I understand where you're coming from, and I get the anger and the frustration that we don't have, or you certainly believe that this country is not secure, whether or not it's people breaking into it from small boats or whatever. But I think we're reaching a critical point in this country today where we have politicians that some people don't like because they don't like their views, and they've justified to themselves that not only is it okay to go on social media and say that I want to rape you or I want to kill your children, I've seen the messages, right, but also that I want to kill you. We have people in this country who genuinely believe they have the right to do that because they think they're in the right. So I think we need to be protecting our parliamentarians and politicians more. 0344 499 1000 for your thoughts on that. You can call, you can WhatsApp, you can voice note, you can text the word talk and your comments to 87222. We're going to talk the World Cup next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Monday morning, it's Talk, and it's the home of common sense. I'm Duncan Barkes in for Julia Hartley-Brewer. Do keep your messages coming in, 0344 499 1000 for your calls, your WhatsApps and your voice notes as we chew over an issue that I think needs to be debated about the future security for MPs and politicians in this country. And you as a taxpayer, are you happy for your tax-paying money to be used in this way? Because I think we're reaching a critical point in the United Kingdom where if we don't protect our politicians better, then democracy just fades away. And it's not just about Anne Widdecombe. You go back over the last few years, the death of the Southend MP, to David Amos, also Joe Cox, the Labour MP as well. We have a problem with freedom of speech in this country. We have a problem when it comes to protecting our politicians. Question is, how far do you go to protect them, both in their home life and professional life, in order to ensure we have a functioning democracy? We don't let the baying mob shut people down with threats of violence. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Now, I'm going to level up with you this morning here on Talk. I'm not a football expert by any stretch of the imagination. I like my rugby, different shaped balls. Not a football guru or even a fan in many ways. I keep an eye on Portsmouth from time to time because I don't live too far away from Portsmouth. So when we talk about the World Cup, I need to be surrounded by glorious experts, and we have one. Ryan Bromelow is a football commentator. He joins us this morning on Talk. Hello, Ryan.
Good morning to you, Duncan.
Good of you to join us this morning. So all of us were watching, I think it's fair to say, all of us were watching the match against Norway. Even I was watching it sitting on my sofa, trying to keep my eyes open because I'd been up very early that day. I live in a road that has 2 bars, right? I'll give them a mention. One is the Eastgate pub in Chichester. The other is the Little Monster Tap. Both of them were rammed with football supporters, drinking the beer, supporting our team, and it was magnificent. We now turn our attention to Argentina on Wednesday night. What do people need to know, Ryan?
About Argentina, well, look, they are streetwise, they are alley cats. I mean, they're one of those teams that you think you've got them cornered and they always seem to find a way out. You think of Cape Verde, you think of Egypt, even a depleted Switzerland, and they always seem to find a way. And I think there's just a stubbornness generally to Argentina, and that comes with wisdom and an experience that they've got in the miles in a tank. And I also think as well, with age, and we look at it from an England perspective, we look at it from with age, you think there's an opportunity there because they lack pace. You can get at them both on the flanks because they don't protect the fullbacks as well. And that was the oldest side as well to play in a World Cup quarter-final since Brazil in 1962. Now, look, the awkward detail there is that Brazil went on and won the competition and retained the World Cup, the only second nation to ever do that. And that's what Argentina's aim is this time around. But you can get at them, and there is an opportunity there. England just need to seize it.
But this isn't just any old football match in the World Cup, is it? We got baggage here, right? I mean, I'm old enough to remember Maradona's Hand of God stuff. I'm also old enough to remember the Falklands War of 1982. I'm not trying to politicise football here, but this is just not about what's happening on the pitch, is it? This goes far deeper.
Yeah, far deeper. And I suppose if you ask a different generation and think of a different fixture, I mean, you've just named the most infamous one of the lot. Maradona, Hand of God in '86, and then you've got the second goal he scores, which is arguably the greatest goal in World Cup history, where he basically picks his way through the England defence.
Ryan, I'm going to interrupt you. Sorry, not to be rude, but only because there will be younger people viewing and listening what we're doing here on Talk who might not be fully across the Maradona stuff, the Hand of God stuff. So, I mean, would you be good enough just to explain for a few minutes what happened?
Well, it was an infamous game, essentially, where Diego Maradona, who Argentina's, I suppose if we're trying to relate it to the younger generation, Duncan, I'm sure that's your aim. If you look at it from, Lionel Messi, who is the kingpin and the talisman of the Argentina team today, that was who Diego Maradona was. And, you'd be surprised. My little brother is 8, and he knows some of the legends of the game already. Yeah. So it's very interesting to me, actually, how that's already filtered through because of his legends. And he scored 2 goals, which will go down in World Cup history as, one of the most controversial goals ever, where he puts the ball in, punches the ball in past Peter Shilton with his hands. And then the second, which is the most mazy and magnificent run from deep, where he skins about 5 or 6 players and then rounds Shilton and finishes it off in sublime style. So, that's the game that you think of, and that's where that rivalry sits deep. And then, of course, the more recent one was 1998, where Beckham gets sent off, and then he has his redemption in 2002 in the group stages. So, look, there's baggage to this fixture. England actually had the better of the 5 games that they played in the World Cup. They beat them 3 times, but they haven't won anything. They haven't won a game against them which has had, any real meaningful note in some time.
Let's talk about the England team in a little bit more detail. I was very clear earlier, I'm not a football expert or a pundit, but I can look at the team and I can look at, you know, the people who have been setting up goals and scoring over the last several matches. Is this, and you can shoot me down in flames if you want, Ryan, is this a fair observation if I say Kane, Bellingham, geniuses, but without them, the team is left wanting? Is that a fair comment?
Well, I think Thomas Tuchel has picked a side that ultimately is moulded around those two players. So I think that's by design. You know, every team has it. Every team has that linchpin.
Yeah.
Let's just take a moment for Jude Bellingham now. I think we've got to the point now with England where, you know, when the game is shaken emotionally, they look to the same handrail, and that is Jude Bellingham. He's got confidence and a belief that I think is contagious and naturally rubs off, you know, amongst the others that he plays with. And I also think when you look at Bellingham as well, he's got extraordinary gravitas for such a young man. You think it's a World Cup quarter-final, brutal heat, a physical, stubborn, demanding opponents. And yet he still finds a way to somehow be centre of that story. And that just bodes well for England. This version of Jude Bellingham, anyway, in the latter stages of the tournament, it's a really exciting prospect that he is going to be in his prime and his peak against Argentina on Wednesday.
And a final quick question. Yourself on Wednesday evening, going to be watching the game down the pub or at home? How do you like to watch?
Well, look, I'd ordinarily watch it. We were giving plugs out. I'd ordinarily watch it in the King's Arms, Fulham, which is my go-to pub. But I'm actually watching it with my dad, the semi-final, and the hope is I'll get back down there for Sunday's World Cup final.
Beautiful. All right, listen, good to talk to you. Thank you, Ryan. Ryan Bromelo, football commentator here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. Keep your messages and calls coming in. After 11 o'clock, we'll be talking to Baroness Claire Fox, independent peer and director at the Academy of Ideas, here on this Monday morning at Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Duncan Barkes in for Julia Hartley-Brewer. Monday morning at Talk, the home of common sense. I'm here through until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Some breaking news. Well, some slight breaking news here. I think you'll find this of interest. The former top civil servant in the Foreign Office, who was sacked by the Prime Minister, this is Sir Ollie Robbins, has launched a legal challenge. His union have just announced. Robbins, who was fired at the height of the scandal around the vetting of Peter Mandelson, if you recall that, is requesting judicial review of Sir Keir Starmer's decision, arguing that the decision was unlawful and unreasonable. Those are his words. The former top Mandarin was dismissed by the Prime Minister in April after it emerged that he had not told ministers of serious concerns raised about Mandelson by the vetting agency and granted him top security clearance. I'll give you a few more words on this. Fully in the picture. In his submission to the court, Robbins argues that Starmer has no statutory authority to dismiss the head of the diplomatic service, that there was no fair procedural involved in his dismissal, and that the reasoning given to him was irrational, and that he was under an obligation not to share the results of security vetting with ministers. Just thought we'd share that with you this morning at 11:04 here at Talk. Let's say good morning to Baroness Claire Fox, independent peer and director at the Academy of Ideas. Morning, Claire.
Good morning, Duncan.
Pleasure to see you, and thank you for your time this morning. Before we get into your reaction to some of the news stories we're chewing over this morning, and also get your view on security for politicians and MPs, you served with Anne Widdecombe, didn't you, as a Brexit MEP? Would you be kind enough just to give us maybe a personal view on what she was like as a person?
Yeah, I mean, I've just written something about it, so I won't rehearse everything. But the thing that was a surprise to both of us was that we got on. I mean, we were on completely different sides of the political spectrum. I was, let's be honest, rather frightened of her initially, and I had this kind of caricatured view of her. You know, can you imagine? She was a shadow Conservative Home Secretary, you know, hardcore in lots of ways. And there was me, kind of lefty liberal type. And I think that we just assumed it would not be a match made in heaven. Actually, we became great friends during that time. And I learned a lot from her. I also developed a huge amount of respect for her. And I think there was a bit of a kind of jokey mutual admiration that went on. So it was very nice. Just give one example. You know, she was sort of a, you know, lock 'em up and throw away the key, you might think. She was associated with being very hardline on prisons. And I'm a bit of a prison reformer type. So I was immediately wary. Of course, when I spoke to her beyond a soundbite, I discovered that she was hugely committed to, for example, education within prisons. She felt that locking people up without productive activity was disastrous. She believed that people should stay in prison for the length of time they were given.
Yeah.
She was hardline in that way. But whilst they were in prison, she wanted to have the possibility of rehabilitation. And so guess what? We agreed, despite everything. So it was very nice to discover, to learn a lesson that you should move beyond the caricatures.
Your story, and thank you for sharing it with us, nicely sums up where I think we have a difference these days. You are very different politically in a lot of your views, put Brexit to one side, possibly united over Brexit. But it seemed to me that Anne Widdecombe was one of those politicians, and there have been others in the past who are sadly no longer with us, who was able to go, OK, well, that's your point of view. I disagree with it massively. Don't like what you say, but I respect your right to say it. Let's go and have a drink in the bar. And we seem to have lost that, I think, that particular trait in today's politics, where it seems to be very, well, I don't like you because of your views. And then that extends, sadly, into areas of possibly, I think, therefore, because I don't like your views, I can verbally abuse you, and it goes further. Do you think that's a fair comment?
I do, although I think there's maybe some precise reasons for that. I mean, on the one hand, we've had the emergence of identity politics, in which particularly young people are socialized into believing that they are their identity. And therefore, when they speak as their identity, that they believe that their beliefs are them in a way that's so personal that they take things with a very kind of thin-skinned approach. And you'll find that. The other thing that's happened, of course, which it more relates to the particular issue that Anne and I were involved in, is that politics and political lines around left and right have really collapsed. We're into a new political phase, but we haven't quite arrived there. In other words, the traditional legacy parties have lost in many ways their base, their social standing in society, and new forces are emerging. And Anne and I, in a way, represented as MEPs, we were the kind of people who came together across left and right because we wanted to demonstrate the ability to change politics for good around having a more democratic society outside the EU without getting into the detail of that. That was what we assumed, that there would be a big political realignment. And we've come to realize that that is not going to be accepted easily by those people in positions of power. And so consequently, there is an actual active attempt at mobilizing against. It's kind of like trying to treat anyone with this new kind of political outlook as though we're kind of some kind of pariahs, you know, the deplorables, the gammon, and populism, because that's the label it's given it, is put into a kind of quarantine, into a force field, and kind of, don't go there. And that therefore has the impact of particularly demonizing people with a political outlook that has become toxic and unpleasant. And we saw that happen in 2016, starting then around the Brexit referendum. It's not about Brexit so much as about the moving on from the old way of doing things to a new way. And I want to get to the new way working through.
Given that demonisation that you mentioned of politics or certain politicians who have views that someone may disagree with, where does that lead you when it comes to the security around MPs and politicians? I mean, one of the things we're chewing over this morning is this issue about donations to Reform UK and political parties. Should they not be capped, or should they be capped? That gets us into what we know is the current case with Reform UK MPs at the moment having 24-hour security that the party is paying for. We've been chewing over this morning on Talk whether or not the time has come to actually give all MPs 24-hour security, and as taxpayers we should pick up the tab. Do you think it's come to that?
You see, I'm much more ambivalent than the conversation you've been having up until now. I mean, I think that in a democracy, it's very difficult to treat politicians, all politicians, as though they need protection from the public. Think about what that means in a democratic society. It sets the public up as the problem, and the politicians have to be given particular privileges. And I worry about that in terms of its implications. And in fact, I mean, it's very presumptuous, but that wasn't kind of Anne's approach to politics, by the way. I mean, she kind of like herself, she took precautions, of course, but she wanted to be out there with the people. Yeah. And I think there will be exceptions. I mean, I heard somebody say, you know, you might need to do risk assessments. You know, not every politician is the subject of public ire. And also, I want the police to do their job at protecting the public at the moment. I'm worried about giving them an extra job. I mean, you just end up in this situation where you think, oh my God, one of the things that's broken down in terms of the social contract is we no longer believe that necessarily the police have got our back. You know, there's a kind of ambivalence. That's what the whole discussion on two-tier policing is. And that we feel as though the police are not able to deal with the kind of crimes that are blighting people's lives, and that when we get into trouble and we phone the police, they won't turn up. So then to kind of make the whole focus of this conversation police protection of politicians feels skewed to me. And you mentioned David Amos earlier, and he very famously, and of course, because of the brutal murder by an Islamist that subsequently occurred, you might say I'm wrong on this, but he did not want particular protection of MPs in their surgeries. He wanted surgeries to carry on. The other thing that I think happens, and I was listening into your conversation here, is you then get into this conflation of physical threat and verbal threat. Mm-hmm. Now, as a big free speecher, I'm very anxious about that. There is some vile sewer-like viciousness on social media. We know that. But I absolutely say that we should not conflate language and words with action, because I can tell you who that will be weaponized against, by the way.
Yeah.
And even when Philip Kisley, who I'm a great fan of, was saying, well, this steps over the line into hatred, that's the basis on which the government are, as we speak, legislating against hate speech.
You make a really, really good point. I mean, where is the line then? Where would you draw the line?
I'm not very good on lines. I mean, I'm very determined that we defend free speech.
Yeah.
I think anything can be called hate speech if it suits them. And in fact, we're seeing, as we speak, serious attempts by legislators and the government to criminalize, demonize, and, you know, ultimately make sanctions for speech which they consider to be hateful and harmful. And they actually would make no distinction. Very often legislation that I'm arguing against in the House of Lords, they're sort of saying, if that post goes up, it's the same as if you burnt the hostel, if you said something, you know, you're familiar with all that. I think we have to be extremely cautious about okaying that because somebody that we love or care about is the victim of violence, to say, and the one thing we definitely don't know is we've no idea what the motives are behind the murder of Anne Widdecombe, and immediately something terrible happens, and this happened with David Davis and Joe Cox. They said, oh, what we should do is bring in a law to ban online hate speech, right? Or, well, we don't want to do exactly the same thing. That would be wrong. Just on your question about, which I didn't say, about donations to reform, I think that's, I mean, I can't stress to you enough that it seems to me that the whole discussion around capping donations and all the rest of it is the use of a kind of form of lawfare against the rise of a new populist party. I mean, it's a sort of desperate bid to rein in the possibility of Reform establishing itself as a new party. Now, I'm not a member of Reform, and I'm not making an argument, by the way, that there's nothing to answer in terms of Nigel Farage and the donations. I mean, I think that's a reasonable set of questions, and I'm not arguing journalists shouldn't ask them or pursue this issue. But bringing in legislation that says you can't give more than this much money and trying to imply that all the money is coming from dodgy foreign donors and so on is a way of trying to delegitimize and undermine the rise of a new movement. And they can't do that politically, because they're kind of broken, hollowed out old parties. And so they try and do it in this way of discrediting those parties.
Yeah, I think that's a more than fair comment. Listen, I just want to get your take on where we find ourselves with our next Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, who, in my book, doesn't have a mandate. The Conservatives have written to the Speaker of the House, Lindsay Hoyle, saying, look, we really need to talk to this bloke, have him in the chamber before he becomes Prime Minister. He's massively avoided any form of scrutiny. I find it staggering that apart from the odd video on X of him getting off a train at Manchester saying, oh, I'm back in Manchester, the Holy Land, you know, we don't seem to get a great deal from the man who's going to be our next Prime Minister that none of us had any say over. Should he have to go in the chamber of the House of Commons before summer recess and actually answer some questions from MPs?
Well, actually, I've only discovered through this discussion that the Commons gets their recess a week before the Lords do. So I could be outraged. We're there for an extra. Anyway, that's hardly to complain about. The emergence of Burnham as the Prime Minister is, you know, very much a coup, isn't it?
It is a coup.
Where, you know, whatever one thinks about Nigel Farage calling that by-election in Clacton, why on earth was there a by-election in Makerfield, right? And the truth of the matter is, it was to resolve the problem of an internal problem for the Labour Party.
Yeah.
It was motivated by the rise of Reform in local elections. It was entirely contrived to, as I say, contain these new forces. And as a consequence, it's extraordinary to me that we're about to have this Prime Minister based on a contrived by-election where the MP didn't need to stand down but did to resolve this issue. And we have no way of holding Andy Burnham to account. So I'm absolutely sympathetic to journalists who say Nigel Farage won't answer questions. Why won't he? But I tell you who's a bit more powerful than Nigel Farage at the moment, and that is the person who's about to be anointed the Prime Minister. Yeah. And he won't answer questions either. And he's kind of very contrived about how he does it. So whether he should be doing it in the House or not, I think the general problem is, for us, that we're trying to guess what he might do as the public. Voters don't know what the tax rates will be or if there will be any. We're not sure what's going to happen about immigration and about indefinite right to remain in terms of the Boris wave and so on. We're trying to pick up and read the runes, aren't we, in newspapers? Because we just do not know.
We don't know, and we shouldn't be in a position where we have to try and pick up on bits and pieces. Listen, Claire, always a pleasure. Thank you. Baroness Claire Fox, independent peer and director of the Academy of Ideas. I mean, Andy Burnham this evening is doing an online hustings, all right, with Labour MPs. And it's so not face-to-face. These are his MPs. He's doing it for an hour. And there were, what, 400 plus Labour MPs? So you've got this online hustings where they get to ask him questions about stuff. Now, on the basis that, let's say, every question and answer takes a minute at best, you're only going to get, what, 58, 60 MPs who are going to be able to put questions to not only their next Labour leader, but the future Prime Minister of this country. It is farcical that Andy Burnham has managed to avoid scrutiny so far in this way, not only from the media, because remember, when he did his Makerfield by-election speech, there was no questions allowed from the media. Then he did his you know, his other kind of like, oh, hello, I'm doing this now, no questions from the media. He did, what was it, something on Reddit, you know, an online, slightly left of centre social media platform where his aides selected the questions on Reddit that he had to, or that he answered. And he did what? A 12-minute radio interview with someone who I would argue, politically, who writes for the New Statesman and was previously a Marxist, I'm not going to name him, got a relatively easy ride. I mean, it beggars belief that our next Prime Minister not only has zero mandate in my book, but also, up until now, and it looks like over the next 7 days, is avoiding any kind of real scrutiny. It's astounding. You might want to pick up on that. 0344 499 1000 for your calls, your voice notes and your WhatsApp messages. We've got a stack of calls to get to, loads of messages. We'll do that next here at Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Monday morning, this is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Duncan Barkes. I'm here through until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Let's get some of your voices on the air this morning. This is Rob talking about MP security.
No, I don't think MPs should be getting extra money off the public for protection, because simply they get paid more than enough money, they claim more than enough expenses, and all the tax money, all the billions of pounds that we put into the exchequer, they don't spend it very wisely in a lot of situations, so they need to do a bit of cost cutting in other departments to fund their own security off the tax they've already got. And B, you're saying how vulnerable MPs are now. Well, I think the population of this country is vulnerable due to the mass uncontrolled migration of God knows how many years, and the horrendous amount of things like rapes, murders and physical and sexual assaults that go on in this country day in, day out that don't get reported. So I think the public need protecting just as much as what the MPs do.
Thanks for your message, Rob. I can't agree with you there. I think we should be doing both things. We should be protecting the public. It's not either or this. We should be protecting the public from people who maybe have come to this country not legally and are a danger to people in this country, as we've seen, sadly, with events over the last couple of years and convictions. We should be sorting out that and protecting people in our country, but also protecting parliamentarians and politicians. I say this with the greatest of respect, and you can send me another voice note or you can come on the air and we can talk about it. This idea that MPs get paid enough money so they can fund their own security, frankly, is for the birds, all right? I take the view we should be paying MPs a hell of a lot more, because then we get a better quality of MP. I mean, I look sometimes at Prime Minister's questions and I hear some of the MPs here on Talk, and it's like a bad episode of The Apprentice. I mean, the calibre of people's a shocker. If we paid more, like £250,000 a year, you would get a better quality of MP, people who've got real business experience, who would think, do you know what, it's worth me becoming a Member of Parliament. Is that a controversial view? Maybe it is. 0344 499 1000. This is Martin in Nottingham. Hello, Martin. Welcome.
Hello there. Yes, I'm going to make an unfortunate prediction. I think that public figureheads are going to be murdered far more often in the future, and I know in my own mind why that will be.
Go on.
Well, my granddaughter, for example, has been told that England's a terrible country full of racists, and that Donald Trump and Nigel Farage...
Well, hang on, who's told her this?
At school.
At school?
Yeah, they were told that Trump is a terrible man, so is Farage, and all this. And
so they have what kind of? I mean, this is fascinating. Forgive me for interrupting, Martin, but what kind of lessons are taking place where they have a pop at Trump and Farage?
They were sent to classes that to try and make them think that everybody's equal and everybody's got to be nice to everybody. There's no evil in the world, and if you're calling out anything like immigration or anything else, you've got to be far right.
Are these weekly classes or what? How does it work?
No, I don't think. Well, I don't know the finite details. But that's what she came home and told us, that they'd had 2 lessons on diversity and inclusion and multiculturalism, and within that they were saying what a dreadful person people like Tommy Robinson and Donald Trump and Nigel Farage, and there were a few other names. But
that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because, I mean, whenever I hear the word inclusion, I find myself thinking it's inclusion always on someone else's terms.
That's it. And just quickly, the second part is that I see so much media now, especially left-wing media, saying that these people are Nazis. I saw Farage described as a Nazi. If you get inside 2 million people's heads, you only need a fraction of 1% of people to decide to do something about it. So what I'm saying is we are creating targets. And for me, and my final thing, the left-wing have blood on their hands today.
All right, a lot of stuff to chew over there. What should we do about it? What can be done about it?
We've got to stop all this equality nonsense and all this paranoia about the right, the left and right. You know, the right wing must be terrible, the left wing's fine. We've got to make mainstream media far more accountable for the kind of language they're throwing around.
When you say mainstream media, what are you referring to?
Articles in The Guardian and The Mirror and everything else that paint right-wing politicians as the devil themselves and things like that. And
yeah, I mean, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you a little bit, not necessarily because I disagree with you, but I would make the observation that also so-called right-wing newspapers like the Daily Mail will paint left-wing politicians in a certain way. I mean, you know, the Green leader, Zach Polanski, who I just find an absolute absurdity, you know, the Mail will go after him and paint him in a certain way. So, I mean, isn't that right across the board in the mainstream media?
I think there's a bit of a difference between Zach Polanski's views and somebody like Nigel who just wants to save the country. He wants everybody to come in, give him a house, legalise drugs. The bloke's a maniac, so he deserves...
Well, I wouldn't disagree. I wouldn't disagree with what you said, because that's virtually akin to my view on Zach Polanski, and I like the use of the word maniac. But the point I'm putting to you is quite simply, it's not just the Mirror and the Guardian who have a pop at politicians they don't like. It happens in other elements of the media, the so-called right-wing press, who will have a go at left-wing politicians. So surely, if we're going to say that we need to take the media to task over how they portray or criticise politicians, it's got to be right across the board, hasn't it?
Well, it has, but we don't get... It isn't fair, is it? We've seen the two-tier policing. We've seen the two-tier justice. It's all the institutions are now controlled by the left. That's the whole point of what I'm saying to you. It's not even, it's not fair, and it's not right anymore.
All right, good call, Martin. Thank you. This is Michael in Birmingham. Hello, Michael.
I just want to follow up. I called about a slightly different point, but to follow up on what the last caller was saying.
Yeah.
I think that the creation on the left is far more visceral than what's on the right. Mm-hmm. So the left-wing mainstream media are far more visceral than the right-wing media there actually is. And going back to the politicians...
Well, I think you're probably onto something there. Certainly my experience, there seems to be more vitriol that is aimed towards anyone who might be on the right of the political spectrum. I think that is fair comment. And just to be clear of our previous caller, I was just challenging his view that it's only right-wing politicians who get clobbered in the media by certain newspapers, for example. I think it does happen right across the board. But I do think you're right. This screeching vitriol of people on the left towards anyone who's got politics on the right of the centre, I mean, is off the scale, isn't it? Why do you think that is?
It's trendy because it's brainwashing. These people have taken Kool-Aid. And going back to the section, I think that should be extended to wider politicians. Local politicians have been attacked too. Like reform councillors have been attacked and beaten up. I mean, I was going to stand for reform in this area, but I chickened out of it. That my address would be found, my property would be targeted, and I didn't want to do it. But the way that the thing needs to happen, what needs to happen is crimes need to be prosecuted. For example, if somebody throws a milkshake at a politician and then comes out of a court with a minor fine and grinning smugly, no, that should be an imprisonable offence, because that could be anything, and it is a serious assault.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I mean, Nigel Farage famously got a milkshake thrown at him, and people are just like, whoa, what are you worried about? It's only a milkshake. The point is, if you start just going, it's only a milkshake, it then gives a green light, I believe, to other people that that kind of behaviour is acceptable. And it's the whole thin end of the wedge stuff, isn't it? If it's all right to chuck a milkshake at a politician, is it all right to chuck a brick? Thank you for your call, Michael in Birmingham. 0344 499 1000. More calls to come this morning here on Talk. I'm just going to do a few messages as well. This is Maria Collins, who says maybe it's time to make constituency meetings for MPs via Zoom. It would provide a level of safety for MPs. Well, it happens a lot. You know, I've certainly in the past seen constituency meetings carried out online using Zoom, though certain politicians, rightly, depending on their kind of character and makeup, will go, I want to meet a person. It should be okay for me to be in a room with a constituent and not feel afraid. That's the counter-argument. Lucy in Devon. I agree that violence must not be tolerated against our MPs, but where were they when the Batley school teacher was fearing for his life? Where were they when the mother of a schoolboy was made to plead for the safety of her child when he scuffed a Koran? That's Lucy in Devon. And Trevor in Harrow, I'm more than happy to read this out if I get things wrong. You're wrong, sir. We do let baying mobs close down Parliament. Look what happened with the Gaza vote when baying left-wing mobs outside forced our Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, to abandon a debate. 0344 499 1000 for your calls, your voice notes and your messages. Don't go anywhere. How about this? Argentina's foreign minister has called Falkland Islanders, you ready for this? An artificially implanted, his words, population, in a long essay for a newspaper in Argentina. I'll get a view on this from Simon Weston, CBE, next here at Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just turned 11:30, Monday morning. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Duncan Barkes. Before midday, we're going to get into the, I think, the thorny issue about casting the next James Bond. I'm quite an Ian Fleming fan. He wrote the original 007 books that the movies were based on. He is very specific as to what Bond was. And once again, we find ourselves having to look at the future of the Bond franchise and the future casting of 007. We'll get into that just ahead of midday. I mean, should it be someone who's not white? Should it be a woman? We'll look at that a little bit later on. In the meantime, let's look at these absurd comments from Argentina's foreign minister. He's called the Falklands Islanders an artificially implanted population. In a lengthy essay demanding Britain enter talks to hand over the territory, his name is Pablo Quanano, and he says that the referendum that was held in 2013, where islanders overwhelmingly, by about 99.8%, said they wanted to remain part of British sovereign territory, was illegitimate. And he called for negotiations over the Falklands' future. He says time does not transform an illegitimate occupation into sovereignty, nor will it divide the territorial unity of the Argentine Republic. And of course, if you're old enough, and I think most of us are, you go back to 1982, the Falklands War. He also said that the war and the 2013 referendum had failed to resolve the Falklands dispute. Well, someone who will have a view on this is Simon Weston, CBE, British Army veteran, veteran of the Falklands conflict, and he joins us. Simon, good morning.
Good morning, Duncan.
Well, what are we to make of this man's absurd comments?
Exactly that, they're absurd comments from a fool, really. I mean, you don't have to be intelligent to be a politician, but it does help. You know, if he's going to talk about it, he needs to, if he's going to make historical references, he needs to read history correctly. Argentina weren't even a country as when we occupied the islands. They were called the nation of states. So there were a lot of states. There was no national flag, so they couldn't plant a flag on the islands to say they'd claimed it. They had no government. They had no president. So they had no parliament. They had nothing. So to make statements like that is ignorant. And many different people from the Argentine parliament have made those ignorant statements before. And it's not changing. Unfortunately, it unsettles the islanders. And then you have people like Gary Lineker who says Malvinas and all. It kind of lends to that rhetoric then. You know, the people have said we couldn't mount a task force like we had last time to deter anybody doing anything. But we do have a lot more people based there, and we have a lot more hardware based there this time. So if they did try to do anything forcefully, which I don't think Mr. Malai would want to, but if they did want to try something forcefully, we could repel it with a greater force than we had last time. Problem is, how long could we sustain it?
Yeah.
You know, that's the biggest issue. We couldn't get supplies or relief people down there quickly enough.
Let's talk about our military capability when it comes to defending the Falklands. So I live on the south coast, not too far from Portsmouth, home of the Royal Navy. I remember quite clearly 1982, the task force sailing out of Pompey to go and reclaim the Falkland Islands. I even get emotional because I watch the fleet sail. It's just one of those things. And you find yourself thinking, two things now. The state of the Royal Navy, could we do the same? And you rightly pointed out that maybe not, but the Falklands are better equipped to defend itself, should it have to. Just run us through, if you can, the capability we have on the islands at the moment that potentially could deter any kind of invasion again.
Well, we've got about 1,800 to 2,000 people down there, which is totally different to the 80 or 90 Marines that were there previously. The Defence Force was very, very amateur back in 82. Now it's very professional, and they are trained heavily by the Marines, the Parachute Regiment, the Special Forces, because of the duties that they'll be called upon to do. And there's about sort of 150, 200 of them. So there's a fairly large contingent of ground forces, but we also have, I think it's about 4 or 6 Typhoon fighters, we have helicopter capability, and we have more vehicles there. So it's a whole different scenario, and we have greater warning facilities, better satellite facilities. There's an awful lot that we have that didn't even exist in 82. So there is the capability to do all that, but it's about relieving anybody if they sent over a big enough force. Most of their navy is where we left it 44 years ago at the bottom of the ocean. But they are buying new equipment or second-hand equipment from around the world, fighter aircraft. They bought a load of those, I think from Denmark or somewhere in Northern Europe anyway. They bought a load of aircraft. So they're rebuilding slowly. And to be competent to fight, it'd probably take them 3 or 4 years to get ready for anything like that. I don't know what their army capability is. The Navy still, I think, is relatively weak. But at the end of the day, we have to be prepared. And you pointed out the situation we find ourselves with the armed forces today. And maybe that is something that they are seeing as a weakness and taking that and saying, well, we'll do a bit more saber rattling and we'll try to push the point. And maybe they're seeing a weakness in our current government. And they're thinking, well, we could pressurize this lot to start to give in. Chagos Islands and areas in that we've been weak on, you know, even Gibraltar to a degree. So maybe that's something that's raising their sleeves and they're getting a bit bolder.
Yeah, I do wonder if that is the case, because if you look at how long it took to deploy HMS Dragon down to Cyprus to protect our military base down there after it was hit by a drone that was fired from Lebanon. It took about 3 weeks, I think, in total, and it took several days to get that ship out of Pompey Harbour. You look at the faff, quite frankly, and the embarrassment of how long it's taken to sort out the defence investment plan, which even now, you know, you've got retired admirals and other senior military figures just going, it's not enough money for the future. Which bit do you not understand? You've got all of this going on, and then you have people like, you have Donald Trump, who in the past has said he might review the White House position on British control over the Falkland Islands. There is a lot of mood music that if you were a politician in Argentina or a bit of a chancer, you might find yourself thinking, well, let's rattle this sabre in a slightly more aggressive way. And actually, who can blame them?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose anybody will take any support they can get from anywhere, no matter how illegitimate. And let's be honest, their claim is totally illegitimate. They have no basis. Over 200 years we've occupied the islands continuously. They've never been there. In that time, and during that 200 and odd years, they could have gone there. They could have done something if they were a nation, but the nation didn't exist. You know, it's still a very young nation as far as that is concerned. So it's illegitimate, the statements they're making, let alone what they're trying to persuade others that they have legitimacy over. But Mr. Trump, I don't think would want to get involved in somebody else's conflict. I think he's got enough on his plate right now. You know, he's starting his own wars unnecessarily. You know, and he's got a lot on his plate to deal with. So I don't think he'll be bothered with Argentina. I think he'll just let this one play out. But I do think that the government here needs to stop thinking when a conflict is over, and it's whether this government or another government, whichever government is in, we need to stop looking at the end of conflict, that there's a peace dividend. Yeah. There is never a peace dividend, because wars can happen so quickly. Conflict takes place so quickly these days because of the way that we can move the equipment that people have. Look at Russia. Within 3 weeks, and now we're 4 years into a war, but the 3 weeks build up and the war was on. And how many, 1.4 million, 1.5 million have either been killed or dead on the Russian side or injured, and about 500,000 on the Ukrainian side. And that happened so quickly. Ukrainians had no equipment. They had to rely on equipment so quickly sent from everywhere else in the world. We can't rely on that. We can't rely on other people to support us in the way that we've supported Ukraine, because we have many Hispanic nations in Europe that wouldn't support us against another Hispanic nation. We've got the Americans. We don't know which way they're going to fall because of our previous prime minister and the fallout that's gone there. So we don't know where we would stand. So we need to have our own supplies in enough quantities to survive at least a year or 2 years. and we need to have the resources in place. It's just correct military strategy, and we can't send our young men and women to war without the right equipment. They're ours. They belong to us. They're our sons and daughters, brothers, uncles, cousins, aunties, sisters. They belong to us, not the politicians. So the politicians making brave statements, oh, peace dividend, is so betraying of all of the duty and the loyalty you're asking other people to show when you want them to go and do their duty. What about the territorials and all the reservists who have left the forces but have to stay on the reserve books for a number of years? They all deserve the very best and the best support. And if it's not there, then all we're doing is preparing to fill body bags.
I can't disagree with anything you said. Listen, a final question, Simon. Obviously, you served in the Falklands War. You lost friends, comrades in that war as well. How does it make you feel on a personal level when you hear and read comments from Argentina's foreign minister, or indeed when Gary Lineker quite blatantly uses the term the Malvinas when he's doing a podcast or whatever? How does that make you feel?
Well, regarding an ex-footballer whose political statements are totally irrelevant, and that's just stupid, that's childish and irrelevant. When it comes from politicians of another country, it makes me concerned for the islanders. If the islanders decided tomorrow they wanted to be Argentinian, that's none of my business. It's nothing to do with me. They have the right to self-determination. It's called democracy. They have the freedom to do what they want. They choose to remain under British sovereign law. That's their choice, and let them long be happy with their choices. But what we have to be careful of is what politicians from other nations do, and we have to be careful what we do here as to not build up their decision-making into thinking that they can go and just invade. Unfortunately, many lives will be lost again. And what the people who are supposed to make the decisions to keep us safe in this country, who've been slow to react, have been weak in reacting because we'd rather spend the money in other areas. What is that? I don't know, maybe for more votes or make them more appealing to somebody else rather than effective. Should have spent the money defending this country and the people in other territories. You know, look at the rush to get rid of Chagos Islands, for goodness sake. Look at the thing we did with Gibraltar. If that turns out to be a brilliant ploy, brilliant. But if it doesn't, how do we rectify it? And this is because all of these politicians, what they end up, they've got a 5-year term. And if they get voted out, oh, well, our project, it didn't work out. Yeah. We're off to do something else. We'll go and work for a bank or work for an investment company. We'll go and give our expertise there. But for the project that they had that failed, they've wasted all that money, all that time, and certainly in the military terms, it could cost many lives. Yeah. And I just don't think that that's acceptable.
I think you're right. Simon, an honour to talk to you. Thank you, Simon Weston, CBE, Falklands War veteran, here on Talk. 0344 499 1000 if you'd like to pick up on anything that Simon has just been saying. The 2026 World Cup is in full swing. And here at Talk, we're celebrating in style. That's why we're giving you the chance to boost your bank balance with a massive £26,000 in tax-free cash. Big stuff. For a summer you won't forget, here's how you enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 83338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. To arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now. This is a network promotion, full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm Duncan Barkes in for Julia Hartley-Brewer here at Talk, the home of common sense. Now, here's a question for you. What do you think is the ultimate James Bond film? You a Bond fan? You a 007 fan? I'm quite a Bond fan. For all kinds of reasons. I mean, we could, as a little sidebar activity, get into who was the better Bond. Obviously, the answer is Sean Connery, right? He was the greatest Bond actor. There's no debate. I'm happy to have the debate. I'm a big fan of Bond. I've also read some of the Ian Fleming books that the films were based on. Because someone said to me, this is several years ago, that the books are quite different from the films. And I don't know what word I can use, really, but the Bond in the books was a bit of a git in many ways. Not a great deal of humour going on there. He's certainly misogynistic and massively chauvinistic as well. And one of the great things about the books is Ian Fleming, who wrote the Bond books, was a massive foodie. So he loved his food. So it's not just a case of Bond having breakfast. He goes into like 8 sentences of what he had for breakfast. Sausages came from here. He even mentions, what's that place in Essex? Tiptree. Tiptree jam and marmalade. Do you know the place in Essex? That features in the Bond books because Fleming was really into his grub. So there you are. So I'm not a student of Ian Fleming or a massive Bond fan, but I take more than a passing interest. And I think for me, the greatest Bond film, probably Goldfinger. Goldfinger has it all, if not only pussy galore. I'll tell you why we're having some Bond chat here this morning on Talk, is because we're once again having to revisit the debate about the future of Bond on the big screen and the casting that might take place. Now, I think if you look at the Bond books, it is very clear that Ian Fleming created a character who was certainly a bloke, who was definitely white, bit of Scottish ancestry, and that was it. However, we find ourselves in a position now where it's quite possible that the future Bond on the big screen may well be played by someone entirely different. Debbie McWilliams has waded into the debate. She's cast the previous 14 Bond films and said Ian Fleming wrote a character, and that's the character that stays. This follows renewed demands for 007 to be reinvented as a woman, all played by a black actor. She was talking to Variety at the Karlovy Vary International Film Festival. She said Ian Fleming wrote a character, and that's the character that stays. That's what I think. I mean, other people might think otherwise, but I don't think that. She stepped down from her casting duties when MGM and the Bond franchise were taken over by Amazon, not remotely woke in any way, shape or form, in 2025, a movie that precipitated a search for the new 007 to replace Daniel Craig. Let's get a view on this. Kayleigh Donaldson is a pop culture writer and critic, and she's with me this morning here on Talk. Hello, Kayleigh.
Good morning.
Once again, we appear to be revisiting this nonsense about the future of who or what should play 007 on the big screen. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I think we could probably float a name around every week for the next 10 years and we'd never run out of names. That's basically part of the fun. It gives you something to talk about. I do think ultimately the actor is probably going to be white. I think they're probably going to be British, sorry, Jacob Elordi, I also think he's too tall. And I think that they're going to get someone no one's heard of. You're talking to someone who's a little bit, I mean, look, you know, I'm not that hooked into pop culture, which is why we've got you on the show this morning to fill in my obvious gaps. Who did you just mention? These films minimum over the next 10 or so years. Amazon has paid a lot of money for this franchise and they are going to want to make this thing as big as possible. It's one of the biggest franchises of all time. That's kind of guaranteed. But I don't think they're going to want someone like a Jacob Elordi or Aaron Taylor-Johnson, who was in Nosferatu, has been floated around. But I think they're too well known. They're going to want someone who has maybe a little bit of familiarity, someone who's maybe done some TV or film roles, but someone who's malleable, someone who they can define as Bond. You know, I think Daniel Craig was relatively unknown before he did Bond. Similar thing with pretty much everyone else who's played the role of him, correct? The two men you've just mentioned, to use a modern day bit of parlance, because I can't picture them, are they quite buff? Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. It's going to be a very conventionally handsome man. He's probably going to be about 6 foot tall. They're not going to go for someone... I mean, I remember when Daniel Craig was cast and people said that he was too ugly for it, which is completely baffling thing, at least in my opinion, to say. But, you know, they're going to want to go classical. I think that's what it's going to come down to. Amazon doesn't want to stray too far from the path. They're not going to go weird. They're not going to go gritty. I think that they're going to want to make something that, that's reliable. They're going to want to make, how many films in are we now? 25, 26? Yeah. They want to make another 25.
Do you think we can trust Amazon with the future of Bond? Because I'm a bit nervous about this.
Yeah, that is actually, to me, a bigger question than the casting, because the director is going to be Denis Villeneuve, who made Dune, who is an excellent director, but he apparently does not have script control. That goes down to Amazon. So, I am more concerned about micromanaging of the property from this big company than, who's going to get to play the part. Like, are they going to let this franchise be a little strange or dark? Because that was what I love about the Daniel Craig films. Those go to some really dark psychological places. But a lot of fans didn't like that. Are they going to want this to be, light like Roger Moore? Or are they going to want it to be very suave and classical? Like, what direction do they go in? I am curious but cynical.
Yeah, it is interesting. Some of the Daniel Craig movies were quite dark. And in some cases, look, I'm a little bit old-fashioned, as you've probably worked out. I just want 007 to blow up some baddies in the most spectacular way possible. I'm not interested in 007 telling me about how he's feeling that day or the reasons for his behaviour. I just want some fast cars, some big guns, and ultimately the baddies to be blown sky high. And my kind of fear is in the world we now inhabit, and particularly with younger generations coming through, not fat middle-aged men like me, they probably want a little bit more than that. And my concern would be, I'm not going to... Shall I use the term? Yeah, I'll use the term. My concern is that 007 just becomes a little bit too woke.
Honestly, I think that with younger generations, they're really not looking forward to Bond as much. Younger generations have their own entertainment now. Look at Backrooms and Obsession, which are two of the biggest hits of the year, driven almost entirely by Gen Z audiences. I will be curious if Amazon wants this to be a thing that younger audiences cling to. They kind of have to have it be that way because they want this thing to continue for decades. But also they want to play it very safe. They want to play it as very reliable, which would be kind of sticking to what we know. Do younger audiences want that? Maybe if the right actor comes along, but it's a much wider canvas nowadays. You don't just have Bond. We get like hundreds of action films a year. You have choices, and that I think that's going to be tough for them. Can they retain the value of what it means to be a James Bond film when we have Marvel and DC and John Wick and so many other films like this.
You make a really, really good point, actually. Again, I'm old enough to remember when a Bond movie was such a big cinematic event, and they used to finish the films with James Bond will return in Thunderball. Listen, Kayleigh Donaldson, pop culture writer and critic, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us on Talk. Barry says Bond film Skyfall, the best Bond movie. Daniel Craig, by far the best Bond. Shame he let his ego get in the way. I'm Duncan Barkes. This is Talk as we head into Monday afternoon. This is the home of common sense. Joining me after the midday news to go through some of the big news stories of the day is Ben Habib, leader of Advance UK, and we'll do more of your calls and more of your messages as well. Don't go anywhere.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm Duncan Barkes. This is Talk, the home of common sense for a Monday afternoon. One of the things we're chewing over on the show today is about the security of MPs and politicians. How much security should MPs and politicians get, and who should pay for it? 0344 499 1000 is the number for that, for your calls, your voice notes and your WhatsApp messages. And also we're kind of straying into this whole area about freedom of speech, when does it go too far, and whether or not tolerance has been lost in today's society when it comes to people's political views. Any thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000 is the number. And of course, as the hour continues, we'll keep an eye on any latest developments regarding the alleged murder of Anne Widdecombe, because by our reckoning, around now is the time that the person who's been in custody since Saturday night, the police need to decide if they're going to let him go, if they're going to apply to extend the amount of time they question him for, or indeed charge the person concerned. So if anything happens regarding that inside the next 60 minutes, you will hear it here on Talk. Your comments, of course, 0344 499 1000. Keep them coming in. We'll take some calls shortly. In the meantime, let's welcome Ben Habib, leader of Advance UK, to the show. Hello, Ben.
Good afternoon, Duncan. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you. One of the things we're chewing over, and you might have just heard this, is where we find ourselves when it comes to protecting MPs and politicians in this country. Obviously, we've got the ongoing investigation into the death of Anne Widdecombe. If you go back a few years, we had the murder of Sir David Amess, the Conservative MP for Southend, also the Labour MP Joe Cox a few years before. You're a very vocal and active politician. Do you feel unsafe in our current times?
I'm probably not the best person to ask. I'm 61. My children are grown up. I feel I've had a good innings, and I'm in politics because I think this country needs dramatic and radical change. And I came to terms with the risks associated with propounding the kind of theories and political philosophy I've got, really before I came into politics, knowing that the country in 2019 was very divided as a result of Brexit. I think it's even more divided now than it was then. And so without wishing to sound cavalier about it, I carry the fear of losing my life perhaps slightly more lightly than a younger person with greater obligations and responsibilities within their own lives. And I think it falls to people like me who are in the position I'm in, it's a privileged position to be in, to actually make these arguments unashamedly, bravely, fearlessly, because someone needs to be making them for the country. And that's where Anne Widdecombe was a phenomenal force. She didn't ever hesitate to say what she believed to be right. And we have a great debt of gratitude to people like Anne, people who are prepared to do that, because of the very real risks that you've just identified. But I'm not prepared to live my life in fear, even if there are lunatics out there who can't have a debate, want to perpetrate harm rather than have a debate and sort these things out in the normal course of democratic process. So be it. I'm not going to live my life surrounded by security guards and whatnot. I want to live a free life. That's what we're all fighting for, isn't it, Duncan? A free life.
Well, you'd hope so.
Freedom to express ourselves and freedom to do as we wish.
You'd hope so. I mean, you've made the point that we seem more divided than ever before, and I think that's true as well. Have you ever received a death threat?
Well, funny enough, I do possess a shotgun. And when my shotgun license was being renewed about a year ago, the police, you get interviewed by the police, and the police said to me, we're going to have to take this review slightly more seriously than normally because there's a death threat out there against you. And I said, is there? I wasn't aware of one. And they had apparently, they monitor these things, I don't know, somehow. But, I think it's rather daft, isn't it, Duncan? If you intend to kill someone, it's rather daft to warn them about it. I would have thought people who go around making death threats actually don't really mean it. Perhaps, again, that's a glib and cavalier approach to it. But would you warn someone that you intended to do mortal harm to them? If you're going to do it, you just get on and do it, don't you?
I think that's a fair point. I mean, the final question related to this, we're chewing over whether or not MPs and politicians should receive greater security, round-the-clock security. You've made it clear that you don't want to be surrounded by bodyguards. What would your position be, though, if we found ourselves as a country saying we need to better protect our members of parliament? Would you have an issue with that as a taxpayer?
No, not at all. I said I'm not the best person to ask. I'm in a special position. I've had a good life. My children have grown up, and I see people like myself having a greater obligation to the country than perhaps younger people with younger families and so on. So if you're
So is that a no?
Well, no, that's a yes. I think they should get greater security. MPs who are younger, who've got families.
Understood.
I think they deserve protection. They should be allowed. They must be put in a position where they're comfortable speaking their mind, that they're not fearful speaking their mind. That's vital.
Let's turn our attention to our Home Secretary, our current Home Secretary. I mean, when Mr Burnham becomes leader of the Labour Party and Prime Minister, she may well move positions or be out of a job. This is Shabana Mahmood, who later today is going to set out the legal steps she will take to deport the freed ringleader of the Rochdale grooming gang, or the Pakistani rape gangs, depending on how you want to define it. This is Shabir Ahmed, jailed for 22 years back in 2012 for multiple counts of child sexual offences, including rape. Was released from prison on licence earlier this month. I think it's fair to say all of our viewers and listeners here at Talk utterly frustrated with the fact that we can't boot this bloke out of the country and make him go back to Pakistan. As I understand it, it's to do with the Immigration Act of 1971. So in order to get rid of this bloke, you would need new legislation, and then it becomes a diplomatic issue because Pakistan, I think, would have to agree to have him back. I think people are sick and tired of this, Ben.
Yeah, so one of the things people seem to be unaware of is that there is a Pakistan prisoner transfer treaty between the United Kingdom and Pakistan, which entitles the United Kingdom to require Pakistan to take back any criminals convicted in the United Kingdom who hold Pakistani nationality. And that treaty, it was put in place in 2018. It hasn't once been invoked by the British government. And the reason it principally hasn't been invoked by the British government is because of fear of the human rights abuses that might take place of convicted Pakistani criminals when they go back to Pakistan. And it comes back to a much more fundamental central point. We seem to have forgotten in this country that those who perpetrate crimes really give up their right, I think, for the civil protection that would normally afford community, society, law-abiding citizens. We shouldn't be fretting about the human rights of someone like Shabir Ahmed and the kind of conditions in which he might find himself in a Pakistani prison, or indeed on the end of a rope. I think they have actually abolished the death penalty in Pakistan for paedophilia. But until 2018, coincidentally the same year this transfer treaty was signed, I think until 2018, Pakistan used to put paedophiles to death. And I don't imagine the Pakistani authorities would have a real problem with taking him back if he holds Pakistani nationality and if that treaty is invoked. And I imagine if there's some discussion to be had over the cost of looking after this guy in Pakistani prison, an accommodation could be reached between the governments. But the onus, Duncan, comes back on the British government. It has to do right by the British people. Yeah. And it has to take the initiative. It can't be for Pakistan to reach out to the United Kingdom into the fabric of the UK and say, well, we'll take this guy back. We've heard you've got a problem with Shabir Ahmed. We're prepared to take him back. The British government needs to invoke the treaty. Yeah. It needs to get rid of this ridiculous set of human rights laws that prevents us from doing it and send Shabir back to where he came from. Now, I understand Shabir has denounced his Pakistani nationality. Yeah. What I would ask the British authorities to do is to look at that very, very carefully, because it ain't so easy under Pakistani law to denounce your nationality. There's quite a process to go through, and he may claim he's denounced it, but that needs very careful checking. And it comes back to the British government to take the steps required to ensure that Shabir Ahmed has had every step's been taken to send him back to Pakistan rather than just coming up against the first bit of resistance, human rights law, or this guy saying he's denounced his nationality, or the 1971 Act that you quoted and saying, well, okay, that's it. Hands off, we can't take action.
Let's turn our attention to the absurd comments from Argentina's foreign minister. This is Pablo Cuerno, who's written a piece for a newspaper in Argentina, quite a lengthy essay, calling those who live on the Falklands Islands, they're artificially implanted. They're an artificially implanted population, and he's demanding Britain enter talks to hand over the territory. We had war hero and Falklands veteran Simon Weston on this show earlier, who rightly just said this kind of stuff really is for the birds. Why do you think it is, Ben? It seems to me at the moment, every few months, we get someone piping up from Argentina, or someone like Gary Lineker doing a podcast and blatantly using the term the Malvinas, which he knows will upset people.
Yeah.
Why is this still a debate that's ongoing, do you think?
Well, we are. Again, it comes back, I think, to the nature of where we are as a country. Our preparedness, for example, to hand Chagos over to Mauritius based on a ruling by a court that actually has no binding effect in the United Kingdom, the International Court of Justice. It has no binding effect, and yet one stupid ruling from that court, and we're falling over ourselves to give Chagos to Mauritius. And Mauritius never, ever had Chagos as part of its own territory. It became part of the British Overseas Indian Territory at the same time as Mauritius did. And yet we're prepared to hand it over. We've handed over Gibraltar, in effect. Gibraltar, which is 2.3 square miles of strategically important British territory, been part of our territory since 1713, when we got it in perpetuity after the War of the Spanish Succession, belongs to the United Kingdom in its entirety. We've handed it over to the European Union, and no one seems to bleat. So if I were Milai and I was looking across at the United Kingdom, a bit perhaps like Pakistan looks across at the United Kingdom now, and we just, they see a belittled, weak, ineffectual government that bends over at the first push and shove. They've seen Chagos go, they've seen Gibraltar go, and they'll think, well, they can't even get a ship out to Cyprus in under 2 weeks. They can't mount anything like the kind of campaign we did in 1982 to defend the islands. They're going to have a go, aren't they? They're going to have a go. And this is the assault on the Falkland Islands, if it comes, is again through our own weakness, lack of preparedness by the British government to do what's right by the people who live in the Falklands and the people who live in this country. It's our fault. And so we need to stop looking at Argentina. We need to build our military. We need to build our national pride. And then we need to tell Argentina to sod off, like we should tell all these other international bodies and institutions and countries that interfere in our country and seek to diminish us. Yeah. Tell them all to sod off.
I wouldn't disagree with you, and I don't think any of our viewers and listeners would disagree. But so I understand exactly where Argentina are coming from, and you've alluded to it mostly inside the last few minutes, OK? They look at our depleted Royal Navy and they just go, I mean, all you need to do is take a boat trip around Pompey Harbour, sadly, and see that, there aren't many vessels left. And as you rightly pointed out, it took almost 3 weeks to get HMS Dragon down to Cyprus a few months ago. It's completely embarrassing. You look at the ongoing faff around the defence investment plan, which finally saw the light of day after about a delay of a year, and even now £1 billion short, and you have retired military folk and naval folk just going, this is not enough, this is not enough. So if you're Argentina, you look at that, you just go, well, their military's quite depleted. Then you look at the track record of this government over ceding stuff like the Chagos Islands, and you mentioned Gibraltar as well, and you probably find yourself thinking, well, why not have a pop? Because the mood music kind of is in our favour. What gets me about all of these stories is, and you use the term, we should tell them to sod off, exactly that. Where is the leadership in this country? Where is the senior politician in government who, upon reading this story, upon learning of this essay in a newspaper in Argentina, puts out a couple of pithy lines, basically telling Argentina to do one, and no one's doing it.
No, it's deeply depressing. It's so obvious what needs to be done, and it's so depressing that we're not prepared to do it. It comes back to, for example, people like Hermer, who repeatedly, this is the Attorney General of the United Kingdom, as people, as listeners might know. This guy makes the case repeatedly for reparations to be paid for the slave trade to Caribbean islands. He's meant to be standing up for British interests. Now, leaving aside the debate over the slave trade, which I'm very happy to have, and I'm sure I would win that debate, we owe absolutely no one a penny over the slave trade. But leaving aside that debate, why is someone who is charged with the protection of this country and the promotion of our interests making the case for foreign powers? It just doesn't make sense. The weakness of any country and the weakness which leads to a country being destroyed comes from within. And it is our own internal weakness now that's being exploited repeatedly on the international stage. We need to get a grip of ourselves.
Ben, we'll come back to you in a few moments' time. Thank you for your response to some of today's news stories. I want to get your views shortly on a record 128 people crossing the channel in one small boat, a headline that increasingly we see all too often. And also what's being described as a migrant shanty town that's sprung up in London, next to London's Marble Arch. Well, we'll hook up again with Ben Habib in a few moments' time. I'm hesitating slightly because I've got some breaking news to share with you this afternoon here on Talk. Now, this is a government announcement. The government has announced that it is using its new powers to prescribe Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Well, about blooming time too. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood wrote in a written statement to Parliament that the UK has, and here come her words, identified activity linked to the IRGC involving threats of life and intimidation on UK soil. This comes after ministers fast-tracked a national security state threats bill through Parliament, as promised by the Prime Minister, following a spate of attacks on the Jewish community in Britain, as the government's existing legislation to prescribe terror groups did not extend to state-backed groups. And let me just tell you what this now means, so you got clarity here. This announcement to prescribe Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps means it is now a criminal offence to do the following: invite support for or express an opinion or belief that is supportive of the IRGC, assist the IRGC in carrying out UK-related activities or engage in conduct likely to materially assist it, accept or retain a material benefit provided by or on behalf of the IRGC. The aim is to disrupt individuals who promote the interests and objectives of designated bodies. Breaching the new law could lead to a maximum of 14 years in prison and or a fine. So I wanted to share that with you this afternoon here on Talk. Just to recap, the government has announced that it is using its new powers to prescribe Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. So two things here. One, why is it taken so long? And two, it's great having this law in place, but do we have the police and the justice system prepared to arrest people who break this new legislation? Only time will tell. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Monday afternoon, this is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Duncan Barkes in for Julia Hartley-Brewer. I'm here through until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Ian Collins here from 1. We'll catch up with Mr. Collins just ahead of 1 o'clock, find out what he's talking about. We're joined by Ben Habib, leader of Advance UK. Ben, let me just get your reaction to the announcement I made a few moments ago. The government announcing that it's using its new powers to prescribe Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. I made the point, this is long overdue, but the question has to be asked, why did it take so long?
It's beyond me why it's taking so long. Our security services are aware of a number of attempts by IRGC to commit terrorist acts on British soil, and yet they haven't been prescribed. They're prescribed in many, many other countries and not in the United Kingdom. We still have, for example, an embassy representing the regime in Iran, just south of Hyde Park, as I'm sure you know. We haven't expelled the ambassador from the United Kingdom. Why hasn't that happened? The ambassador should be expelled. IRGC should be proscribed. Whatever one's view on the Iranian-American conflict, whatever one's view on it, and there are lots of differing views, and understandably so, we are with the Western side of that alliance. And these people are not, they're against us. And so we've got to take a line, again, coming back almost full circle to what we were discussing before the break. We've got to take a line which protects the United Kingdom, protects our interests. So why it's taken so long to come round to the prescribing of IRGC is absolutely beyond me. I do hope that it is enforced. And while they're at it, they should prescribe the Muslim Brotherhood as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's all well and good having this announcement and thinking, well, look, it's taken a bit of time, but thank goodness, you know, the group has been prescribed. But you rightly, you know, let's hope it is enforced. I just don't have the faith it will be enforced, because if you look at some of the marches that take place in London most weekends, you can see support for the IRGC. Now, obviously, this doesn't necessarily extend to maybe flying a flag or showing a symbol of the IRGC. But if there is blatant support for this organisation that's now prescribed, are we really going to see police officers arresting people? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, well, they have at least arrested some Palestinian Action members. You remember Palestinian Action or whatever it's, I think that's the full name of the organisation, yeah, was proscribed after their the painting of those jets. Was it Bryce Norton?
That's it.
And there have been arrests made for that. But you're absolutely right about these marches that take place. You know, not just IRGC support, but also support for Hamas, which has been prescribed in the United Kingdom for a long time. It is remarkable that there are more proscribed terrorist groups by the UAE than there are in the United Kingdom. And many of the terrorist groups proscribed in the UAE are legally allowed to conduct business in the United Kingdom. Again, it's a sign of internal weakness.
Yeah.
You know, I often come back, I don't know if you've heard of this, Duncan, but there was a brilliant book written by Kenneth Clarke, Alan Clarke, MP's father, a guy called Kenneth Clarke, wrote a book called Civilization. And Civilization is all about the barbarian, effectively about to put it's about civilizations, but about the barbarian about to put civilization out of its misery. And the message that struck home to me from that book, and I think plays out repeatedly in real life, is that it's not the barbarian really that puts you down. The barbarian is the instrument that puts you down. It's your own weakness and your own lack of preparedness to confront the barbarian that enables that to take place. Now, we're very good in this country at pointing out various barbarians and various assaults to the country. We're very, very bad at understanding why it is that we are under this assault and where that inner weakness is coming from, and a complete failure to address that inner weakness.
Let's finish our chat this afternoon on Talk with another example of weakness. Now, for those people watching and listening outside of London, let me just explain this particular site where we have what appears to be a gang of Eastern European migrants who have been accused of pickpocketing, theft, and also professional begging. Has this particular camp is on the corner of Park Lane and Oxford Streets, literally in the shadow of Marble Arch. So if you're a listener and viewer of Talk and you're outside, it seems to me, Ben, this is another example of the weakness that exists in this country when it comes to the authorities, because it's been described as this migrant shanty town, and I don't think that's an overreaction. I've seen this over the years. this. It literally, I mean, you got makeshift kind of shelters and tents. You got people hanging around smoking, drinking, and it appears from nearby businesses and witnesses participating in crime. This is a reoccurring problem, but it seems to me that TfL seem to not really have the will to do much about it, or indeed ditto Westminster City Council, who talk a very good game. I mean, why is this stuff going on?
Again, it's shocking. You know, begging in this country has been against the law since, I think, 1832 or 1833, one of those 2 years. And we now, it's all over the place. And we're not just talking about in poor areas of the United Kingdom. You're talking about off the corner of Park Lane and Oxford Street. Yeah. And my office, which is just off Piccadilly, I've got lots of people. And now sometimes I sit in a restaurant outside that, you know, in summer, they've got seating arrangements outside. And beggars walking along the pavement asking me for money when I'm having my lunch or my supper. Yeah. This is becoming a third world country. It's absolutely abominable, and it needs to be taken very, very seriously. As you say, begging goes hand in hand with crime. You look at any developing country, any third world country, where there are beggars, there's criminality. And often these people, the beggars themselves, are being exploited by criminals, being sent out. In third world countries, they're often maimed in order to gain the sympathy of those from whom they're asking for money. And we've got to stop it. We've got to stop it in its tracks.
We definitely need to stop it. And also, I mean, just from a visual perspective here, the idea in this very, very visible part of London, where, you know, London, particularly this time of year, relies massively on tourism. You know, you've got tourism around the world flocking to our capital city. And they see this, and I suspect they just go, what has London become? What has happened to what, you know, what was once known as Great Britain? Ben, got to wrap it up, but thank you for your time. Always a pleasure to talk to you. That's Ben Habib, leader of Advance UK here on Talk. Let's get the views of Paul in Nottingham. Hello, Paul. Welcome.
Oh.
Hello?
Sorry. Yeah, how are you doing? Yeah, how are you doing?
Yep, good. What would you like to say?
Oh, sorry, let me set you off. Yeah, so basically, I was just going to comment on the ex-Labour MP, Heather.
Yep.
As he is known.
Go on. I'm struggling to hear you a little bit. Are you on the move somewhere, or are you walking?
Yeah, I am. I'm just going to stop 2 seconds.
Yeah, do me a favour, mate. Stop, because I'm struggling to hear you, and I'm struggling with my big earphones on. Our listeners and viewers will be going nuts. So if you can stop and we can have a chat, that'll be great. Go on. What would you like to say?
So I'm static now. So basically, what I was saying was, it's a case of what he was saying was absolutely abhorrent.
Who's this? Sorry, because you broke up.
Oh.
Who are we talking about? We lost him. Hello?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm here. Sorry.
Go on.
Yeah. So what he was saying was absolutely abhorrent.
Who was saying what?
This Heather, the ex-Labour MP.
Oh, OK. So this is a case of...
Anne Whitcomb, what he was saying about Anne Whitcomb.
This was, just so viewers and listeners are clear, this was the software developer who works at Aberdeen University, talked about Anne Whitcomb and commented on her death and hoped that she was screaming in agony.
Agony, tied up on her bed and all that.
Yeah, so
just
go
disgusting.
on. Yep.
So my point is, it's absolutely abhorrent, and anyone that says differently has got a moral issue.
Right.
So I think that's got to be objective. Although
should the person in question lose their job over what they put on social media?
Well, this is my point. I think we've got two things going on here. We've got a free speech issue that's covered by law.
Yep.
And then we'll have an employment issue which covers by employment law.
Okay.
So I think I will protect his right to express that abhorrent view.
Yeah.
But it's by law, so I don't want him arrested, and I don't want him put in prison for it.
No.
But it doesn't stop an employer saying a person with those views so abhorrent has no right representing our company. So should he be fired? Yes, absolutely.
Because you can make the argument, and I've seen it in the past, from I suppose you'd call it a personnel or human resources point of view, that you're actually bringing the organisation or the company into disrepute, and you may well use that as a reason to terminate someone's employment or indeed somehow, I suppose, punish them for what they've done with maybe a suspension or whatever. But it's an interesting view, Paul, that you believe it should be the company who should have the right to implement some kind of penalty for what this person has done, as opposed to the police saying, put them in prison or saying they should be arrested or maybe prosecuted for what they've done. Because you rightly identified, it's all about freedom of speech. And this is the thing, right? If you believe in freedom of speech, as abhorrent as this person's comments were on social media about Anne Widdecombe, if you believe in freedom of speech, you've got to take the view that they should be allowed to have that view. You might not like it, you might find it utterly deplorable. But if you believe in freedom of speech supposedly should work right across the board. Thank you for that, Paul. Up next here on Talk, we're going to talk to Lord Redwood, Conservative peer and former Cabinet Minister. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Ian Collins here from One. I'm Duncan Barkes. Between now and then, 0344 499 1000 for your calls, your WhatsApps and your voice notes as well, talking about the need, possibly, of politicians and MPs having increased security. If you believe that should be the case in order to have a functioning democracy, who should pay for it? 0344 499 1000 is the number. We'll get to more of your calls and messages on that between now and 1 o'clock this afternoon. In the meantime, let's talk to Lord Redwood, Conservative peer and the former Cabinet Minister. Lord Redwood, welcome to Talk.
Well, good afternoon. It's good to be talking common sense.
It's always good to be talking common sense, and particularly good to hear common sense from yourself. Let's first off, and I will get your thoughts a little bit later on before we wrap it up, regarding MP security and securing politicians and whether or not there needs to be greater protection in order to maintain democracy, and also this whole area about ensuring that we still have good political, robust debate in this country about people being in fear of their lives, because I would welcome your view on that. But first, I just want to look at this story that we've not really touched on yet today, and this is of a future Conservative government potentially pulling out of the international court that put Britain on the hook for trillions of pounds in climate reparations. Of course, it's Kemi Badenoch who has said that the UK should not remain under the jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, if it is against the national interest. And she's commissioned her Shadow Attorney General, Lord Wolfson, to look into the case for leaving, as he did last year on membership of the European Court of Human Rights. And she's done this after a think tank warned that a ruling last year by the ICJ, based in The Hague, could lead to Britain facing colossal claims for damages. I would argue this is the right thing for Kemi to do.
Well, indeed, I'm glad she is having a good look at it. It does highlight, of course, though, Duncan, that in past times we were much more careful about giving our powers away to international bodies. And when we joined up with the International Court of Justice, we already had certain key exemptions. For example, we said that they couldn't boss us about on Commonwealth matters and they couldn't boss us about on defence matters. The current government seemed to ignore all that when they wanted to give Chagos away, because they wrongly thought the International Court could make them give Chagos away. Now we discover this very activist interventionist court is wanting to find ways to levy big fines or taxes and charges on countries like our own because of past global warming offences and sometimes because of past colonial offences. Well, again, we should make it very clear that they don't judge us on that. These are moral issues which we sort out in our normal democratic process. So I think there would be an easy way through on all this, because I think we could simply add another caveat to our membership of the ICJ, as many other countries do.
And it is interesting. We saw a similar report being commissioned about our membership of the ECHR. What I'm liking about what I'm seeing from Kemi Badenoch is she's taking a very solid and methodical approach to some of these issues that exist. And it's not just, and I'm saying this, I say this with respect, not just formulating a bit of policy on the back of an envelope or a fag packet, actually going away, saying to someone, look at this in detail, then once we've got the evidence, we can take a position and we can back up that position. And I think increasingly that's really important in today's politics.
Well, indeed, because you don't want another government that lets you down. You can elect a government with fine headlines and sound bites, and then they may actually try and implement them. But if they discover when they're in office that they can't do it, that the officials say no, the domestic law says no, or even worse, the international law says no, then the public is let down and they get extremely angry with yet another group of politicians and another party. So yeah, I've been very impressed by the way Kemi has drawn on the resources in the wider Conservative family to get some good opinions, some good research, some good analysis. And then she goes away with her shadow cabinet, decides what they have to do about it, because it's very important that if they offer a promise to the public, it's something they can deliver should they form the next government.
Lord Redwood, we're just going to pause our chat for a second. I've got some breaking news I need to share with viewers and listeners here at Talk. This is a statement from counter-terrorism police. We are now hearing, inside the last few minutes, that counter-terrorism police are now leading the investigation into the death of Anne Widdecombe after new information and evidence has come to light. That's the latest from counter-terrorism policing South East. So just to recap that, if you've put the radio on or you're watching us online, counter-terrorism police are now leading the investigation into the death of Anne Widdecombe after new information and evidence has come to light. That's the latest inside the last 60 seconds from counter-terrorism policing South East. Lord Redwood, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but I'd like to get your reaction to that. I mean, I think there's been some confusion, certainly in the country, as to why we're not hearing maybe everything we should, or information being released regarding the horrific murder of Anne Widdecombe. I mean, your reaction to the news that it's now being looked at in terms of possible terrorism?
Well, like many, I'm still in shock for this awful murder. And I did find it a bit surprising to be told that it definitely wasn't terrorism, it definitely wasn't politically motivated, because it did, according to what we were told, involve somebody driving a very long way to one specific house to attack one specific person. So I guess this means that the police now think that it could have terrorist or political entanglements. The sooner they get to the bottom of it, the better, to clear up all the uncertainty. I'm not going to start fueling speculation, because I don't know any more than you do about what this all means, but it clearly means that we shouldn't rush to any conclusions, because they still don't know the motive and they still haven't got the full story out of their suspect.
And just related to this, we've been talking this morning about whether or not there's a greater need for politicians or MPs to have security in order to, as someone said earlier, protect democracy. You served as an MP for many, many years. Do you think we're reaching a point where we need to look at greater security measures for our politicians?
Well, politicians are sometimes offered it or can ask for it if they are under specific threat. I mean, I and quite a lot of my colleagues were on IRA death risk threats. And so the police came and offered us advice and certain backup in case that materialised. And of course, we needed a lot of police support when we stumbled out of the Grand Hotel at Brighton following the big bomb attack on us all. So I think from those days and probably earlier, there's always been the ability of the state to help advise, or for MPs to seek advice and help. And I'd advise any MP who feels at risk, who doesn't feel they got enough help, to ask the right questions and go and see the right people. And I'm sure they'll find people willing to help.
Before I let you go this morning, I'm quite keen to just get your thoughts on where we're heading with our future Prime Minister, who looks like it's Andy Burnham. Not entirely sure there's any mandate for him to become the next Prime Minister or Labour leader. I have a ritual most mornings, Lord Redwood, one of which involves looking at your morning posts on the social media platform X about the state of our economy and what our current Chancellor should be doing. So let's just tap into your vast brain and experience regarding this. What's your, from what we've seen and heard so far, and it's not a great deal because Andy Burnham's not really been held to much scrutiny as to what he may be doing when he becomes Prime Minister. We don't know who his new Chancellor would be. Some people say he might keep Rachel Reeves. I can't see it myself. But ultimately, for the sake of the economy, is Burnham going to be a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, we're not sure, but the danger is he's going to be a bad thing because he's starting very badly. Rachel Reeves, we're told, is going to make an important speech in the city tomorrow. Well, has she cleared that with Burnham? Does he agree with it all if she's not going to remain as Chancellor, or does it mean she's remaining as Chancellor? We all know that markets hate uncertainty. Businesses need more certainty about government plans and tax plans in order to invest, to hire, to make our economy go better. If we have another summer of people guessing which taxes are going to go up and how bad the autumn budget is going to be, because Burnham won't set out what he intends to do, that is going to be very bad news for all of us, bad for jobs, bad for the economy. Burnham has got to understand what went wrong under Starmer Reeves. We had too many periods of people speculating about economic evils and tax rises, and then we had all too many tax rises come true. Burnham, before the summer, before the bond markets start to get to work with their worst fears, needs to make a very clear statement about whether he's sticking to all the financial budget plans he's inherited, or if he's not, what changes is he going to make? Because the changes, Mr. Burnham, have got to be affordable and realistic, and more taxes will mean less growth and a weaker economy.
Well, let's hope he does the right thing and issues a statement, makes a speech as soon as he enters office as Prime Minister, so there's no uncertainty in the markets. Lord Redwood, as always, a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for your time this afternoon here on Talk. Let me just bring you a little bit more on that breaking news. If you just put us on, let me just recap and also bring you an update. So we've now heard, and it's been confirmed, that counter-terrorism police are now leading the investigation into the death of Anne Widdecombe. This is after new information and evidence has come to light. That's what we've heard inside the last couple of minutes from Counter-Terrorism Policing South East. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has just posted the following on social media platform X. She's written, following new information and evidence, they are now leading on the investigation into the horrific murder of Anne Widdecombe. This is Counter-Terrorism Police. The police are pursuing multiple lines of inquiry to establish the motivation for this attack. I will be updating the House further this afternoon. We expect that statement to take place at around 3:30 this afternoon. When it happens, you'll be the first to hear about it with Ian Collins, who's on Talk from 1 this afternoon. We'll get back to your calls and messages in a few moments. I'm Duncan Barkes, and this is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
The 2026 World Cup is in full swing, and here at Talk we're celebrating in style. That's why we're giving you the chance to boost your bank balance with a massive £26,000 in tax-free cash. For a summer you will not forget, here's how you enter.
Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win a massive £26,000.
The question is, what would you do with all that money?
I don't know. We've got a wedding.
I would buy a camper van. Probably just like clothes, yeah.
Go on a big holiday.
Immigrate.
So if you fancy getting your hands on £26,000 tax-free, here's all the details you need to enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 83338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1 PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. To arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now. This is a network promotion, full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
And good luck with that. Listen, just to recap this breaking news here on Talk, counter-terrorism police are now leading the investigation into the death of Anne Widdecombe after new information and evidence has come to light. This is according to Counter-Terrorism Policing South East. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has just posted the following on social media. Following new information and evidence, they are now leading on the investigation into the horrific murder of Anne Widdecombe. The police are pursuing multiple lines of inquiry to establish the motivation for this attack. I will be updating the House further this afternoon. So that's a message on social media from Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood. Now, we expect the statement to be made just after 3:30 this afternoon. Ian Collins is here from 1. When that statement is made, you'll hear it first here on Talk. But the key headline here is that counter-terrorism police are now leading the investigation into the death of Anne Widdecombe. 10 minutes to 1 is the time. Let's try and get as many of your calls on the air between now and 1. 0344 499 1000 for your calls, your WhatsApps and your voice notes, talking about MP security. How much security should MPs and politicians get in this country? And at what price is freedom of speech? Let's take a call. This one's in Devon. It's James. Hello, James.
Hi, Duncan.
Hi, what would you like to say, sir?
Yeah, I'd like to say, Duncan, that the MPs are a lot safer than us and our children, aren't they, for the mistakes that they've made since the 1980s with the immigration issues we've got and the unvetted men they've let into this country. So our children and us are at more risk than they are with what they've done.
But that's not a reason not to give them increased security, is it?
So they should basically feel nothing at all. So going down to the shops to them should be nothing at all. But for us and everybody else in this country,
no. I hear the point. I'm just asking you the question, and I understand the point you. Well, hang on, mate. Let me just follow it up. I understand the point you're making, but that's. I get that maybe yourself or members of your family or people in your neighbourhood don't feel safe in certain parts of the United Kingdom because we have people who've come to this country who don't respect the laws and don't understand our culture and don't share our values, who might put young women at risk. Right? I get that completely, but that's surely not a reason to put at risk the safety of MPs.
No, everybody should be safe. But the elite political class now should understand that, people are at risk. Because when they're at risk, they want to change the law and do everything possible to protect themselves. But when we're in risk, and it happens to us, we're far right.
But with the greatest of respect, James, I would suggest that someone who is a member of Parliament is more high profile than you are. So consequently, they deserve the security, don't they?
They do. Absolutely, they deserve their security. And I've got, for what happened for Anne Widdecombe is absolutely disgusting. And that brings me on to the police. They're not the brightest, are they? We all said this, and they denied it all. But now it's all come out.
Well, I see. It's so difficult, and I think policing in this country has reached a stage where people have lost faith. However, I am sympathetic to making sure the right stuff is said regarding this investigation, because, you know, we live in a world now of lawyers, right, who, if they can get someone off a charge on the slightest technicality, they will do it, all right, because they get paid vast amounts of money to do it, sometimes through legal aid. So if you are Devon and Cornwall Police, you have to be so careful what you say and what you do. But I also take the view, James, that I think the lack of information has been pretty shocking in this particular case. And there is a view which is, if you've got nothing to say, say nothing, right? I take the view which is there's such an interest in this case, and rightly so, because of Anne Widdicombe's death and what happened to her, that the police should be doing updates at least twice a day, just to tell people what they're doing again and again and again. James, going to move it on. This is Joan in Sunderland. Hello, Joan.
Hello. I'm worried about democracy in this country. I really am. I took your comments on about Burnham. Now, I personally think Burnham got in as the top job by the back door. Now, no doubt you will correct me if this has ever happened this way before.
Well, you're putting me on the spot here, so I'm just trying to think back over political history. So we have a new MP. Well, we have an MP who stood in a by-election because one of his mates, Josh Simons, decided to stand down for no particular reason, by the sounds of it, in order just to create a space for Andy Burnham potentially to get elected. Has that happened before? I don't know is the honest answer, but let's just walk through the process here. Then the man who got elected, in this case Andy Burnham,
yes,
stands to become leader of the Labour Party against no one else, because the Labour Party are so desperate to get rid of Starmer, this is my interpretation, and so desperate to get Andy in that there wasn't... I mean, this is a shocking thing, Joan. Can I just go off on the tangent here? That out of all of the Labour MPs, they couldn't find one person to stand against Andy Burnham for the sake of at least testing Burnham's views and potential policies, right? He's not had to explain himself at all. It's just amazing. There can't be any talent left in the Labour Party. Right, back on track. So,
yes.
He then becomes leader of the Labour Party and consequently Prime Minister with no general election, and a man who wasn't even standing as an MP in 2024 on the last Labour Party manifesto. So just walking it through with you on air here at Talk, I think it's the first time it's ever happened.
Ah, good.
I think.
Now, what I also want to know is this man has no mandate, but why is he being given such an easy time? He's not being asked questions. We just hope...
Well, this is the thing, and forgive me for interrupting. I think he would be asked questions if he had the backbone to actually do some press conferences and let the media ask him questions. But as I made the point earlier, you know, he won his by-election, did a little thing in Manchester the morning after in Makerfield, didn't take any questions from the media. Then he did that thing at that museum in Manchester, didn't take any questions from the media. And he's done one thing online where his aides selected the questions he was asked. I mean, in what world? And he did one 10 to 12 minute radio interview. So I think people would ask him questions if they were in a position where they were allowed to ask him questions. Joan, thank you. This one's in London. It's Paula. Hello, Paula.
Hi there. Good afternoon. Hi.
Hi. What would you like to say?
I would like to say, in regards to the politicians and their
security.
Yeah. I would really recommend the route we should be taking is what they would call a politicians without privilege. So in Sweden, the Riksdag, they have a policy where their politicians, if they live approximately 30 miles away from the Riksdag, the second house in Parliament, that they can have eligibility for parliamentary housing, so flats or, you know, spaces where they can rent out for that period that they have to be at Westminster.
Yeah.
And then that would be, so they shouldn't be having second houses. So this would cut the cost, and this is something they should be looking at, because at the end of the day...
Well, this is not about second houses, is it? This is about increased security.
No. But what I'm saying is that the money then, you know, but with the security, you could offer that security whilst at the Westminster, but in reference to having security, on top of having a second house, and this is a cost-effective approach. So what I'm saying is, yeah, you want security, but yet you want this, you want that, you want the pay rise, blah, blah, blah. Something has to go. You have to start...
All right. I mean, I understand the point you're making. You referenced Westminster a few times. I made this point earlier. What about an MP on a Sunday afternoon who's, you know, at home, possibly a house in the constituency, because that's the area they represent? Where would you stand on the security that they should have outside of Westminster?
Well, that's what I'm saying. The cost of having the second home, they shouldn't have a second home. They should be coming down.
This would be their real home in the constituency. So, you know, you've got old Barney Sausage, who happens to represent... Hang on a sec, I've got to make the point. Happens to represent, I don't know, Bognor Regis on Littlehampton as a constituency. Sunday afternoon, that's where they live. They go back to Westminster on Monday. What kind of security should they have in their constituency where they live?
Well, they can have security, sure. But how much is it going to cost? It's going to cost us.
Well, that's what it comes down to, and whether or not taxpayers are prepared to pay for it. Listen, going to move it on, Paula. Thank you. Ian Collins is here after one, which is just as well, because otherwise I've no idea why he's sitting opposite me.
Yeah, it'd be a bit weird, wouldn't it? I just walked in.
Who is this man?
It's actually my day off.
What are you
I
doing
just
here?
came in.
Yeah.
A bit of a chat. I know you're long enough, Doug. I'll be just nip in for a chat.
Well, you're relatively safe, aren't you?
Indeed.
Good. What's occurring?
Well, I'd like to interview Mr.